In the deep, velvet black of the pre-mammalian Earth, the universe was a place of heavy, suffocating vibration rather than melody. To understand the origin of the human ear, that delicate, fluid-filled cathedral of architecture currently resting on the side of your head, we must first strip the world of sound as we know it. We must travel back through the strata of deep time, peeling away the layers of the Holocene, the Pleistocene, the Cretaceous, descending into the dark, red heat of the Permian. Picture, if you will, a landscape that defies the modern imagination. This is the era of the supercontinent, Pangaea. It is a world where the land masses are fused together in a single colossal embrace, surrounding a vast, sterile interior desert. The atmosphere here is thick, heavy with humidity and carbon, a blanket of air that presses down upon the earth with a physical weight. The sky is a bruised purple at twilight, devoid of the contrails of jets or the silhouettes of birds, for the birds have not yet been dreamed of by the slow mind of evolution. Stand in this ancient world. Close your eyes. Listen. What do you hear? You expect the roar of a dinosaur, but the dinosaurs are still millions of years in the future, waiting in the genetic wings. You expect the chirping of crickets, the drone of bees, the complex symphonies of the rainforest. But there is nothing. The air itself is silent. It is a thick, mute fluid. There are no vocal cords vibrating in the throats of the beasts that roam here. There are no syrinxes in the chests of avian gliders. The wind moves through the forests of giant seed ferns and horsetails, creating a low, rushing hush, but there is no biological answer to the wind. The trees groan under their own weight. The tectonic plates grind deep beneath the crust, sending low-frequency shudders through the bedrock, but the air above remains unclaimed, an empty radio frequency waiting for a broadcast. This was the era of the acoustic twilight. It was a time when the planet was structurally incapable of the song. Life in this epoch was dominated by the heavy tread of giants, the synapsids and the early sauropsids, creatures that were neither lizard nor mammal, but something ancient and terrible in between. Picture the gorgonopsid, a predator the size of a bear, with skin like tanned leather and saber teeth that protruded from a skull built like a battering ram. It moves through the underbrush with a slow, deliberate cadence. It does not twitch its ears to the sound of a snapping twig, for it has no external ears. The sides of its head are smooth, unbroken by the intricate funnel of cartilage that you possess. These creatures lived in a world of low-fidelity sensation. They did not hear the world. They felt it. The physics of this ancient silence are profound. Sound, as we understand it, is a ripple in the air, a compression wave that travels from a source to a receiver. But for a sound to be heard, there must be a mechanism to translate that airy ripple into a signal the brain can understand. This is a problem of engineering. Air is thin and light. Biological tissue and fluid are dense and heavy. When a sound wave traveling through air hits a body of water or a body of flesh, it mostly bounces off. It reflects. It is lost. This is called impedance mismatch. Without a specialized tool to bridge that gap, the air remains a locked room. The giants of the Permian had not yet forged the key. Instead, they relied on the ground. This was the era of heavy listening. The great reptiles and mammal-like ancestors were tethered to the earth by the very bones of their skeletons. When a storm approached from the east, rolling across the vast central deserts of Pangaea, the thunder did not crash in their ears with a high treble crack. Instead, the low-frequency boom traveled through the soil, vibrating the rocks, traveling up through the heavy limbs of the creatures, into their bellies, and finally into their jaws. The jaw. Here lies the central character of our story. In the biography of the body, few structures have carried a burden as heavy as the jawbone. In this ancient epoch, the jaw was a massive, singular hinge. It was an instrument of violence and consumption, a clamp designed to crush the tough, fibrous vegetation of the seed ferns or to shatter the bones of prey. It was built for torque, for power, for the brutal mechanics of survival. But it was also a sensor. The bone of the lower jaw, the mandible, rested near the ground. As the gorgonopsid lay in the mud of a drying riverbed, its chin against the cool earth, the jawbone acted as a seismograph. The footsteps of a rival herd 3 miles away would send tremors through the substrate. These tremors vibrated the dense bone of the jaw, which in turn rattled against the skull, sending a dull, thudding report to the brain. This was hearing without clarity. It was a world of shadows and muffled thumps. There was no directionality. If you felt a vibration, you knew something was moving, but you did not know if it was a mate calling from the left or a predator stalking from the right. You could not hear the whistle of breath. You could not hear the scratch of claws on bark. The high-frequency universe, the snapping, clicking, hissing, singing world, was invisible to them. It was a secret kept by the physics of the atmosphere, a dimension of reality that existed right in front of their faces, yet remained utterly inaccessible. Imagine the isolation of such an existence. To be a creature of the Permian was to live in a solitary confinement of the senses. Communication was visual or olfactory. You signaled aggression by flashing teeth or changing color. You signaled readiness to mate with pheromones that drifted on the heavy wind. But you could not call out in the dark. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the supercontinent into a blackness deeper than any modern night, the world effectively disappeared. Without the ability to hear high frequencies, the night was a void. You could not navigate by the echo of your steps. You could not hear the approach of danger until it was close enough to cause the ground to shake, and by then, it was often too late. But deep in the shadows of this world of giants, something else was stirring. Our ancestors were there. They were not the rulers of this earth. They were the refugees. Small, scurrying things, no larger than a badger or a shrew, the early synapsids, the dog-toothed lizards that would eventually give rise to the mammalian line, lived on the margins. They were the underdogs of the Triassic transition, forced into the ecological niches that the giants ignored. They lived in the underbrush, in the rotting logs, and most importantly, in the burrows. To survive in a world dominated by massive, ground-shaking predators, these small ancestors had to adopt a strategy of avoidance. They became creatures of the twilight and the dark. And it was here, in the cold, terrifying dark of the pre-mammalian night, that the silence began to break. Evolution is often described as a march of progress, but it is more accurately a response to desperation. It is the art of making do with what you have. Our ancestors, huddled in their burrows while the earth shook with the tread of the gorgonopsids, had a problem. They needed to know what was happening at the surface without exposing themselves to the light. They needed to detect the giants before the giants detected them. The heavy, ground conduction hearing of the reptiles was not enough for these small creatures. A tiny body does not couple with the ground as well as a massive one. Furthermore, the threats they faced were not just the heavy stomp of a dinosaur, but the swift, silent strike of smaller predators. They needed to hear the air. They needed to hear the brush of scales against a leaf. And so, deep within the embryonic development of these ancient beings, a slow, agonizing repurpose began. It was a subtle shift in the code of life, a rewrite of the blueprint that would take millions of generations to perfect. Consider the bones at the back of the reptile jaw. There were several of them, the articular, the quadrate, the angular. For eons, their only purpose had been to form the hinge of the mouth, the pivot point upon which the lever of the jaw swung open and shut. They were eating bones. They were tools of digestion. They were thick, sturdy, and unrefined. But in the lineage that would become us, a strange vulnerability appeared. As the brain began to expand, demanding more room in the skull, and as the chewing muscles changed their orientation to allow for grinding rather than just snapping, the pressures on the back of the jaw shifted. The bones at the hinge began to lose their structural purpose. They became smaller, looser. In any other timeline, This might have been a fatal flaw. A weak jaw is a death sentence in the animal kingdom. But nature, in her infinite and accidental wisdom, found a new use for this weakness. As these bones shrank, they became lighter. And as they became lighter, they became more susceptible to vibration. They were no longer just heavy struts of calcium. They were becoming delicate filaments, capable of trembling in sympathy not just with the ground, but with the air itself. Imagine the very first moment this sensitivity began to manifest. An ancestor, curled in a burrow beneath the roots of a giant fern, sleeps with one eye open. Outside, the wind shifts. A dry leaf skitters across the stone. To the giants above, this sound is non-existent. But to the small, trembling creature in the dark, the shrinking bones in its jaw vibrate ever so slightly. It is not a sound, not yet. It is a ghost of a sensation, a tickle in the skull, a phantom awareness that something has moved in the air. This was the dawn of a new sense. It was the biological equivalent of inventing the telescope, but for the invisible waves of the atmosphere. The silence of the stone was ending. The era of the song was approaching. But let us not rush the eons. The transition was agonizingly slow. For millions of years, our ancestors lived in a transitional state, a purgatory of the senses. They possessed what paleontologists call a mandibular ear. They still heard through their jaws, but the mechanism was refining, thinning, stretching. They were caught between the earth and the air. This period of waiting is poignant to consider. The world was still a violent, silent place. The great extinction events of the Permian-Triassic boundary were looming. The Great Dying, where 90% of all life would be extinguished by volcanoes and poisonous oceans. Through this apocalypse, our ancestors carried the seed of the future in the architecture of their skulls. They scurried through the ash of burning forests, listening to the rumble of a dying world through jaws that were slowly, imperceptibly turning into ears. We often think of evolution as a visible change, the growing of a wing, the lengthening of a neck. But the most profound changes happen in the dark, in the microscopic machinery of perception. The silence of the pre-mammalian earth was a forge. The pressure of the predators, the necessity of the night, and the unforgiving physics of sound were the hammers that beat against the anvil of the jawbone. They were hammering out a new shape. They were forging the stapes, the incus, the malleus. They were crafting the tiniest bones in the body, preparing them for a journey that would take them away from the mouth and up into the cranium, isolating them from the noise of chewing so they could focus entirely on the delicate, shimmering signals of the world. But in this first chapter of our history, that journey had only just begun. The bones were still shackled to the mandible. The song of the birds was still a distant dream. The complex language of humans, the whispers of love, the shouts of warning, the lullabies sung by the fire, was unimaginable. There was only the heavy heat, the smell of sulfur and wet fern, the velvet black of the night, and the waiting of the bone. It is a humbling thought, as you lie here in the safety of the modern world, surrounded by the hum of electricity and the distant traffic of civilization, to realize that the hearing you rely on to sleep, the soothing sound of this voice, the rhythm of the rain, began in such silence. It began in the mud of a supercontinent that no longer exists. It began with a creature that was terrified of the dark, pressing its jaw to the ground, praying to a universe it could not hear, hoping to survive the tread of giants. We are the children of that silence. We are the legacy of the vibration. And the story of how we moved from the shudder of the stone to the melody of the song is the story of the greatest acoustic engineering project in the history of the universe, a project built not of copper and wire, but of time, death, and the stubborn resilience of 3 tiny bones. The curtain is about to rise. The air is about to be unlocked. But first we must honor the silence that came before. For without the silence, there could be no music. To understand the architecture of your own silence, you must first understand the architecture of the deep past. Close your eyes and let the modern world dissolve. Let the walls of your room fade into the damp green humidity of the Triassic period. We are standing on the precipice of a great change, not in the landscape of the Earth, but in the landscape of the body. The sun is setting over a supercontinent that no longer exists. The air is thick with the resinous scent of cycads and the rot of ancient ferns. As the great golden orb dips below the jagged horizon, the rulers of the day, the massive archosaurs, the ancestors of crocodiles and dinosaurs, begin to settle into the torpor of the cold-blooded. They are creatures of the sun, fueled by its warmth, their energy fading as the light dies. Their world is visual, dominant, and loud in its heavy movements. But as their eyes close, another world awakens. In the deepening shadows of the undergrowth, where the roots of the ginkgo trees twist like petrified snakes, a different kind of creature stirs. It is small, perhaps no larger than a badger, covered in a primitive, coarse fur that matted against the damp earth. This is a cynodont, a dog-toothed therapsid. It is not quite a reptile, and not yet a mammal. It is a biological bridge, a lonely traveler on the road to humanity. And within the skull of this small, trembling creature, a miraculous migration is taking place. A slow, silent, tectonic shift of bone that will forever alter the way life perceives reality. We call this event the Great Migration of the Jawbones. It is perhaps the most elegant and desperate act of scavenging in the history of evolution. Nature, in its frugal genius, rarely invents from scratch. It repurposes. It takes the discarded tools of the past and refines them for the future. And here, in the dark of the Triassic night, the tool being repurposed was the very foundation of the bite. Consider the jaw of the reptile. It is a formidable machine, a compound structure made of several distinct bones fused together to create a rigid, crushing lever. The back of this jaw, the hinge that connects the mandible to the skull, is robust. It has to be. It bears the stress of tearing flesh and crushing carapace. But for our small ancestor, the cynodont, the priorities of survival were shifting. It could not compete with the giants in a contest of strength. It could not outbite the archosaurs. Its survival depended on something else entirely: avoidance. The night is a cloak, but it is also a blindfold. In the absence of light, vision, the primary sense of the reptilian brain, becomes useless. To survive the darkness, to navigate the labyrinth of the forest floor without alerting the sleeping giants, the cynodont needed a new kind of radar. It needed a sense capable of piercing the gloom, of detecting the unseen. It needed to hear, but the air was locked. As we have explored, the impedance mismatch between the thin atmosphere and the fluid-filled tissues of the body meant that airborne sounds, the snap of a dry leaf, the rustle of a moth's wing, the soft exhale of a predator, simply bounced off the skin. To capture these ghostly vibrations, the body needed a mechanism to amplify them, to bridge the gap between the air and the inner ear. And so, the slow, agonizing sacrifice began. Deep within the genetic code of these creatures, a silent error occurred. A mutation, a subtle shift in the developmental timing of the embryo. The bones at the very back of the jaw, the articular and the quadrate, began to shrink. For generations, this might have been a disadvantage. A weaker jaw meant a harder time chewing the tough beetles and fibrous roots that made up the cynodont's diet. It was a vulnerability. To lose the strength of the bite is to lose the primary weapon of the animal kingdom. But evolution is a trade-off. It is a negotiation between the cost of a trait and its benefit. As these bones shrank, they detached from their rigid duty as a hinge. They became loose. They began to float. And in their looseness, they discovered a new talent. They could vibrate. Imagine the life of a single cynodont during this transition. Let us call her the listener. She wakes in her burrow as the moon rises, a silver coin in a bruised sky. She is hungry. Her pups, blind and hairless, mewl softly in the dirt. She must go out. She creeps to the entrance of the burrow, her whiskers twitching. In the old world, the world of her ancestors, she would have felt the ground for the thud of footsteps. But tonight, the ground is still. The danger is not a heavy giant. The danger is a swift, silent colophysis stalking the ferns. The colophysis is light. Its steps do not shake the earth. But the listener has a secret weapon. The bones in her jaw are no longer just for chewing. The articular bone, once the anchor of her bite, has migrated upward. It has begun to touch the quadrate bone of the skull, not as a grinder, but as a partner in a delicate dance. A membrane of skin has stretched over a gap in her skull, the first primitive eardrum. A cricket chirps in the darkness. The sound wave, a ripple of compressed air, hits the membrane. The membrane shudders. This shudder is transferred to the articular bone, which rocks against the quadrate. These tiny bones, liberated from the heavy labor of eating, act as a system of levers. They take the weak force of the air and concentrate it, amplifying the pressure. They push against the fluid of the inner ear, sending a wave of information to the brain. For the first time in the history of her lineage, she does not just feel the cricket. She hears it. It is a revelation. It is a map of the world drawn in frequency. She turns her head, triangulating the sound. She knows where the insect is. She knows where the silence is. She scampers into the night, a ghost moving through a landscape of sound, guided by the repurposed ruins of her own jaw. This migration was not the work of a single night, nor a single millennium. It was a journey of millions of years, a slow-motion metamorphosis played out across the epochs. We can see the stages of this journey fossilized in the rock. We find skulls where the bones are still part of the jaw, but smaller. We find skulls where they have begun to separate, held in place by a cartilage bridge, a Meckel's cartilage, that acts as a temporary scaffolding while the renovation of the skull takes place. It is a profound biological paradox. To gain the world of sound, we had to break the foundation of our face. We had to weaken ourselves to become aware. As the Triassic gave way to the Jurassic, and the Jurassic to the Cretaceous, this mandibular ear continued its upward drift. The bones became smaller, denser, more refined. The articular became the malleus, the hammer. The quadrate became the incus, the anvil, and the stapes, the stirrup, which had been present in a primitive form, joined them to complete the chain. These three bones, the ossicles, are the smallest bones in your body. You could hold all three of them on the tip of your finger, yet they are the most sophisticated mechanical linkage in the natural world. They are a triumph of miniaturization. They are a bridge of calcium suspended in a cavern of air, the middle ear. Think of them as the gatekeepers of your consciousness. Every word you have ever heard, every song that has ever made you weep, every whisper of "I love you" has physically traveled through this microscopic chain. The hammer strikes the anvil moves the stirrup piston kicks the window of the cochlea. It is a Rube Goldberg machine of flesh and bone, a mechanism so delicate that a loud enough noise can shatter it, yet so precise it can detect the difference between a major and a minor chord. But let us return to the darkness of the prehistoric forest, for the implications of this migration go far beyond just hearing bugs. This shift in anatomy fundamentally changed the relationship between the organism and the environment. Before the ear, the connection to the world was direct and brutal. You touched the world, or the world touched you. Sight requires a line of sight. You cannot see around a corner or through a tree. Smell relies on the vagaries of the wind. But sound? Sound bends. Sound travels around obstacles. Sound penetrates the dark. The invention of the middle ear allowed our ancestors to inhabit a sphere of perception that extended 360 degrees around their bodies. It created a peripersonal space that was auditory. A mother cynodont could hear her offspring crying from behind a rock. A mate could signal from the canopy above. The world became three-dimensional in a way it had never been before. This was the birth of distance. Before hearing, danger was immediate. If you felt the predator, it was likely already upon you. But with the high-frequency hearing enabled by these migrating bones, danger could be detected at a distance. The snap of a twig 20 feet away gave the animal a precious commodity: time. Time to freeze, time to hide, time to flee. This gap, the time between the sound and the event, is the birthplace of anticipation. It is the root of anxiety, yes, but also of planning. The brain had to evolve to process this new stream of data. It had to distinguish between the background noise of the wind, which is constant and safe, and the sudden, transient spike of a footfall, which is rare and dangerous. This required a massive upgrade in neural processing. The brain of the mammal began to grow, not just to control the body, but to interpret the air. We stopped being passive receivers of vibration and became active analyzers of the soundscape. We began to listen for patterns. And what of the jaw? What became of the structure we left behind? As the hammer and anvil migrated up to the ear, the mammalian jaw was left with a single bone, the dentary. This simplification made the jaw stronger in a different way. A single bone is less likely to break than a compound one. It allowed for the evolution of complex chewing motions, the side-to-side grinding that is unique to mammals. This, in turn, allowed us to extract more energy from our food, fueling the warm-blooded metabolism that would eventually allow us to conquer the cold. So, you see, the migration was a dual revolution. In separating the ear from the jaw, we gained two superpowers: the ability to hear the high frequencies of the night and the ability to chew efficiently enough to fuel a high-energy brain. We traded the brute force of the reptilian snap for the metabolic engine of the mammal and the sensory radar of the listener. But let us pause and honor the vulnerability of this transition. There must have been a time, deep in the Jurassic woods, when our ancestors were caught in the middle. Their jaws were weakening, but their ears were not yet perfected. They were the transitional forms, the awkward teenagers of evolution, surviving by the skin of their teeth, quite literally. Imagine a night in the shadow of a sleeping Allosaurus. The air is cool, a respite from the volcanic heat of the day. Our ancestor, a small shrew-like creature named Morganucodon, scurries along a fallen log. She pauses. She is listening with a jaw that is slowly detaching from her skull. She hears the rustle of a scorpion. She hears the wind in the conifers. She is a pioneer of the senses. She is carrying the blueprint of Mozart, the blueprint of language, the blueprint of the lullaby, locked within the tiny shifting bones of her head. She does not know that she is building the machinery for human speech. She only knows that she must hear the owl before the owl sees her. This is the evolutionary duality we spoke of earlier. To gain this sensitivity, we had to become fragile. The ear is an open door. It cannot be closed like the eye. It is always open, always vulnerable to the violence of loud noises. We traded the armor of the reptile for the sensitivity of the mammal. We chose awareness over shielding. And as the eons ground on, as the continents drifted apart and the great oceans widened, this acoustic technology spread. It diversified. In the bats, it became sonar, painting the world in echoes. In the whales, it became a song that could cross oceans. But in the line that led to us, it remained a tool for social connection and survival in the undergrowth. The extinction of the dinosaurs was the final test. When the asteroid struck, when the sky turned to fire and then to ash, the world went dark. The plants died. The great visual predators, who relied on the sun and their eyes, starved in the gloom. But the mammals, the listeners, they were already adapted to the dark. They had spent millions of years living in the shadows, listening to the world through their repurposed jawbones. When the sun was blotted out, they did not panic. They retreated into their burrows, wrapped in their fur, and listened. They heard the world falling apart. and they endured. The survival of our lineage through the apocalypse is owed, in no small part, to this migration. We listened our way through the end of the world. Now, fast forward through the haze of time. The ash settles, the sun returns. The mammals emerge from the bunkers of the earth to claim the planet. The forests return, but they are different now. They are filled with the complex songs of birds, who also evolved their own hearing, though by a different path, and the chittering of squirrels, the calls of primates. The human ear, as we know it, was finalized in this post-apocalyptic bloom. The pinna, the outer ear, grew to funnel sound into the canal. The brain developed the auditory cortex, a specialized computer for decoding frequency. But the ancient history remains. Every time you chew a piece of tough steak, you can feel a ghost of that old connection. Place your fingers just in front of your ears and bite down. You feel the muscle bulge. You hear the crunch reverberating through your skull. That internal sound, the loudness of your own chewing, is a memory. It is a reminder of the time when eating and hearing were the same mechanical process. And when you lie in bed at night, struggling to fall asleep because of a dripping tap or a distant car alarm, do not be angry at your ears. They are doing exactly what they evolved to do. They are the vigilant sentinels of the helpless sleeper. They are the legacy of the cynodont in the burrow, terrified of the silence, desperate to hear the approach of the beast. Your inability to ignore sound is not a flaw. It is a survival mechanism that kept your ancestors alive through 100 million years of dangerous nights. The migration of the Jawbones is a story of how we learned to touch the air. It is the story of how we turned a weapon, the jaw, into an instrument, the ear. It is a testament to the creativity of life, which can look at a bone designed to crush and say, "No, let us make this tremble. Let us make this sing." So tonight, as you drift toward the velvet black of sleep, listen. Listen to the quiet hum of your own existence. Listen to the breath in your lungs. Listen to the settle of the house. And remember the tiny, heroic bones that are floating in your skull, the ancient travelers that migrated from the mouth to the mind, so that you might hear the song of the universe. They are the silent witnesses of our journey from the stone to the stars, and they are listening still. Imagine, if you will, the sensory landscape of the Jurassic night. The sun, a burning golden eye that has watched over the feeding frenzy of the great reptiles, finally dips below the jagged horizon of the Araucaria forest. The light does not fade quickly. It bleeds away, turning the sky from a bruised purple to a deep, suffocating charcoal, and finally, to a velvet obsidian. As the visual world dissolves, the massive, towering forms of the sauropods, those cathedrals of flesh and bone, blend into the shadows of the trees. They become statues of silence, their metabolism slowing, their eyelids heavy. The day, with its brutal clarity and its reliance on sight, is over. But for your ancestors, the night is not an end. It is a beginning. We are now deep in the Mesozoic era, a time when the earth was lush, hot, and dangerous. The air is thick with the scent of rotting ginkgo fruit and the metallic tang of ozone from distant storms. Here, in the canopy's suffocating darkness, a different kind of life emerges. It is the era of the small, the furry, and the frightened. Our forebears, creatures no larger than shrews or squirrels, crawl out from the hollows of trees and the crevices of rocks. They are entering a world where vision is rendered useless. The canopy above blocks the stars. The moon is but a rumor of light, filtering through the dense needles of the conifers. To move through this world using eyes alone would be suicide. To see is impossible. Therefore, one must feel the air itself. Here, in the safety of the treetops and the deep burrows, the new acoustic technology, the migration of the jawbones we witnessed in the previous era, was refined under the crushing pressure of survival. The ear was no longer just a biological curiosity or a repurposed eating tool. It was becoming a weapon. It was becoming a guardian that never slept. Consider the profound vulnerability of sleep. It is the great paradox of biology. To restore the brain and the body, an animal must disconnect from reality. It must lie down, paralyze its muscles, and drift into unconsciousness. For a creature at the bottom of the food chain, this is a terrifying proposition. To close one's eyes is to blind oneself to the approach of death. But the mammal found a solution, a compromise written in cartilage and nerve endings. While the eyes could close, retreating behind the protective shutters of the eyelids, the ears remained open. There is no lid for the ear. There is no muscle to seal the canal, no skin to pull over the drum. It is a permanently open wound to the world, an aperture that cannot be shut. This design is not an accident. It is a necessity. The ear became the sentinel of the dream. Even as the conscious mind drifted into the dark waters of sleep, the auditory cortex remained lit, a lone watchman in the tower, scanning the frequencies of the night for the snap of a twig, the huff of a breath, or the slither of scales against bark. This was the era where the brain began to map the world not through light, but through the echo and delay of sound. It was a fundamental shift in how we constructed reality. During the day, the world is a painting, static, colorful, defined by edges and shadows. But at night, the world is a symphony of vibrations. It is fluid. It is a ghost world where objects are defined only when they move or when they speak. To capture these ghosts, the anatomy of the head had to change. The external ear, the pinna, began to evolve. In the reptiles and birds, the ear is often just a hole, a simple opening covered by feathers or scales. But in the mammal, the skin began to fold. It pushed outward, extending from the skull, driven by a genetic imperative to catch the wind. It curled and cupped, forming a funnel, a flesh-crafted satellite dish designed with exquisite geometric precision. Picture the head of our distant ancestor, perhaps a creature like Juramiya or Morganucodon, perched on a mossy branch in the Jurassic gloom. Its ears are large, disproportionate to its tiny head. They are not the static, decorative shells we humans wear today. They are mobile, restless, alive. Beneath the skin of the scalp, a complex network of muscles, the auricularis group, twitched and pulled. These muscles allowed the ears to swivel independently, rotating like radar dishes to scan the horizon. One ear could listen to the rustle of a beetle in the leaf litter below, while the other swiveled backward to monitor the wind for the silent approach of an owl-like predator. This independent targeting was a technological marvel. It allowed the creature to exist in two acoustic spaces at once. This is the lost flexibility of our own bodies. Today, you might have a friend who can wiggle their ears, a parlor trick that usually elicits laughter. But that tiny movement is a vestige, a ghost of a survival reflex. It is a memory of a time when your ancestors sat in the dark, swiveling their ears to track the location of a killer. The muscles are still there, atrophied and forgotten, wires cut by millions of years of safety, but the blueprint remains. The evolution of the pinna changed the physics of hearing. By funneling sound waves into the canal, the external ear amplified the pressure, acting as a natural hearing aid. But more importantly, the ridges and folds of the outer ear, the helix, the antihelix, the tragus, served a computational purpose. When sound waves hit these fleshy ridges, they bounce and filter in specific ways depending on the angle of arrival. A sound coming from above sounds slightly different than a sound coming from below, not just in volume, but in color or timbre. The brain of our ancestor learned to decode these subtle colorations. It learned that a sound with a certain spectral notch was coming from the ground, perhaps a scorpion moving through the needles. A sound with a different quality was coming from above, perhaps a pterosaur adjusting its wings on a roost. This was the birth of three-dimensional acoustic mapping. We were no longer just hearing sound, we were hearing space. We were building a hologram of the forest inside our skulls, updated in real time by the flow of airwaves. But the forest is not a recording studio. It is a chaotic, noisy environment. The Jurassic night was filled with the background radiation of nature, the ceaseless drone of insects, the roar of waterfalls, the groan of trees swaying in the wind, the heavy patter of rain on giant ferns. If the ear simply amplified everything, the brain would be overwhelmed by white noise. It would be a cacophony of useless data. And so, another invisible adaptation occurred, arguably more important than the growth of the ear itself: the birth of selective attention. Our ancestors learned to triage the soundscape. Deep within the neural pathways of the brainstem and the auditory cortex, inhibitory neurons began to function as biological noise-canceling headphones. They learned to filter out the constant, predictable sounds, the rustle of wind, the flow of water, to create a canvas of silence against which the deviant sounds could stand out. Imagine the cognitive load of this task. The little mammal freezes on the branch. The wind is howling, shaking the canopy. To the untrained ear, it is just a wall of noise, but the mammal's brain subtracts the wind. It creates a synthetic silence, and in that silence it isolates a single, faint sound: the crunch of a dry needle under a foot. This is the birth of focus. It is the moment the brain decided what mattered. In the silence of the primeval forest, hearing became the primary tether to reality. It was an intimate, terrifying intimacy with the environment. To see a predator is to know it is there. To hear a predator is to know it is hunting. Vision is detached. Sound is physical. The sound wave that touches the predator also touches you. It connects you. Every sound told a story of intent. The brain had to become a master linguist of the wild. It had to discern the difference between the casual, heavy footfall of a herbivore, safety, and the stealthy, paused rhythm of a carnivore, danger. It had to distinguish the difference between a mate's call, a high, chirping invitation, and a rival's warning. This was the difference between lineage and extinction. A single mistake, a single misinterpretation of a frequency, meant death. We became creatures of the frequency, tuned instruments vibrating in sympathy with the forest's breath. Let us descend into a day in the life, or rather, a night in the life, of this ancestor. It is 150 million years ago. The air is cooling rapidly as the heat of the day radiates back into space. Our protagonist, a small, shrew-like creature, wakes in a hollow log lined with soft moss. The first sensation is not light, but sound. The stomach rumbles, an internal acoustic signal of need. She creeps to the opening of the log. Her whiskers twitch, feeling the air currents. Her ears prick up, swiveling forward. The forest is loud. The cicadas of the Jurassic are deafening, a buzz saw of noise, but she ignores them. She is listening for the specific high-pitched scuttle of a beetle. There, to the left, a faint scratching sound against the bark of a conifer. She moves. Her paws are padded, silent. She is a shadow within a shadow. She does not run, she flows. Every few steps, she pauses. This stop-and-start locomotion is driven by acoustics. When she moves, the sound of her own body masks the world. She must stop to listen. She moves, she freezes. She moves, she freezes. She is dancing to the rhythm of her own vulnerability. Suddenly, a new sound cuts through the insect drone. It is low, barely a vibration, a huff, a displacement of air. It is the exhale of a predator. Her ears snap toward the sound. The brain calculates the distance. 10 meters. The brain calculates the height, ground level. It is something large. The beetle is forgotten. The biological imperative shifts from feed to survive. She freezes completely. Her heart rate spikes, the pounding of blood in her ears threatening to drown out the world. But she holds her breath. She becomes a stone. The predator moves closer. She can hear the dry scales rubbing against each other, a sound like sandpaper on wood. It is a coelophysis, a slender bird-like dinosaur hunting in the dark. The dinosaur relies on movement. If she runs, it will see her. If she stays still, she is invisible to its eyes, but she is still visible to its ears if she makes a sound. The standoff lasts for an eternity. The dinosaur pauses, sniffing the air, listening. The mammal is terrified. This fear is not an abstract emotion. It is a physical state, a cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol flooding her system, sharpening her hearing even further. She can hear the dinosaur's foot lifting from the mud. She can hear the suction of the wet earth. Then, a distraction. A moth flutters nearby, its wings beating against a leaf. The dinosaur snaps its head toward the distraction. The sound of its attention shifting is audible, the neck muscles tensing, the head turning. In that split second of acoustic cover, our ancestor moves. She darts back into the hollow log, diving into the safety of the dark. The dinosaur strikes at the moth, missing, its jaws snapping shut with a sound like a cracking whip. Safe. This scene, played out billions of times over millions of years, is the forge in which your ears were cast. You are the descendant of the ones who heard the footfall. You are the descendant of the ones who distinguished the wind from the breath. The ones who did not hear, who slept too deeply, who failed to filter the noise. They are fossils in the rock, dead ends in the great tree of life. But this vigilance came at a cost. This is the adaptation versus cost that defines our existence. To be a sentinel is to never truly rest. To have ears that never close is to be permanently wired into the chaos of the world. As the millions of years drifted by, as the continents broke apart and the Atlantic Ocean opened like a widening wound, this acoustic anxiety was baked into our DNA. We began to associate silence with safety, but also with suspense. We learned that the sudden cessation of sound, the hush that falls over a forest when a predator enters, is the loudest sound of all. We became experts in the negative space of sound. We learned to listen to the gaps. This constant monitoring required a massive amount of energy. The brain is a greedy organ, consuming 20% of our calories, and a large portion of that energy is spent processing sensory input. The auditory cortex is a furnace, constantly burning fuel to analyze the airwaves. Even when we think we are relaxing, the brain is listening. This is why, even today, in your comfortable bed, in a house made of brick and glass, safely locked away from the wolves and the dinosaurs, you might find it hard to sleep in a new place. Your brain does not know the acoustic signature of this new room. It does not know that the creak of the floorboards is just the house settling. It treats the creak as a footstep. It treats the hum of the refrigerator as a growl. It wakes you up, flooding your body with adrenaline, asking, "What was that?" It is not paranoia. It is a memory. It is the vigil of the nocturnal forest, replaying itself in a modern setting. Your inner ear is still sitting on that Jurassic branch, waiting for the dawn that was millions of years away. And what a long wait it was. For 150 million years, the dinosaurs kept us in the dark. They owned the day. We owned the night. This long exile in the shadows forced us to rely on sound, smell, and touch. It suppressed our visual development, which is why most mammals today have poorer color vision than birds or reptiles. But it supercharged our hearing. We became the listeners of the planet. While the dinosaurs roared and stomped, relying on size and sight, we whispered and squeaked, relying on nuance and frequency. We built a culture of communication in the dark. We called to our mates with ultrasonic chirps that the dinosaurs couldn't hear. We created a secret channel of information, a radio frequency that was exclusively ours. This period of nocturnal bottleneck is the reason you have the complex middle ear bones we discussed in the last chapter. It is the reason you have the swiveling pinna, or the muscles for it. It is the reason music moves you to tears, because for eons, sound was the only way to connect with another living being in the dark. And finally, the dawn did come. Not just the sunrise of a new day, but the sunrise of a new era. The asteroid struck. The winter came. The giants fell. And when the dust cleared, the world belonged to the listeners. But we never forgot the lessons of the forest. We carried the night with us. Even as we emerged into the sunlight, stood on two legs, and began to conquer the savannah, we kept the ears of the nocturnal prey. We kept the open door. So tonight, as you lie in the darkness and you hear the wind outside your window or the distant hum of the city, do not try to block it out. Acknowledge it. Thank your ears for their vigilance. They are doing their job. They are the ancient sentinels, scanning the frequencies, ensuring that you are safe, just as they did when the world was young and dark and full of monsters. Allow the sounds to wash over you. Let the triage of your brain label them. Wind, safe. Rain, safe. Breath, safe. The vigil continues, but the danger has passed. The forest is quiet now. The giants are gone. You can rest. The world did not change in a day. It did not shift from the emerald cathedral of the jungle to the golden ocean of the savannah with the suddenness of a curtain drop. It was a slow, agonizing desiccation, a drying out of the planet that took millions of years. As the tectonic plates shifted and the great rifts of Africa tore open the Earth's crust, the rain shadows grew longer. The moisture that had once fed the eternal canopy began to fail. The trees, those ancient guardians of our primate infancy, began to retreat. They pulled back like a receding tide, leaving behind islands of green in a rising sea of grass. Imagine standing on the edge of this new world. Behind you lies the forest, the place of vertical safety, where the acoustics are dampened by moss and humidity, where sound travels short distances before dying in the dense foliage. Ahead of you lies the terror of the open. The Great Rift Valley stretches out, a vast, shimmering expanse of heat and light. It is a world of horizontal infinity. The ceiling has been removed. The sun, once a dappled rumor on the forest floor, is now a heavy, physical weight on your shoulders. But the most profound change is not the light. It is the sound. The forest was a place of chatter, of close-range signals, of complex echoes bouncing off tree trunks. The savannah is a place of wind. The wind here is a constant presence, a relentless, invisible river that flows over the grass. It creates a continuous white noise, a hissing, rushing wall of sound that masks the subtle cues of reality. For a creature evolving to survive here, the acoustic challenge was immense. The ear had to undergo a radical recalibration. The high-frequency hearing of our insect-hunting ancestors, designed for the quiet dark of the undergrowth, was no longer sufficient. It was too sensitive, too easily overwhelmed by the broadband roar of the wind. We needed a new way to listen. We needed to tune our biological radio receivers to a new frequency, the frequency of the horizon. As we stepped out of the trees, a momentous shift occurred in the architecture of the body. We stood up. The rise of bipedalism is often told as a story of vision, standing up to see over the tall grass, to spot the predator from afar. But let us consider the acoustic advantage of the upright posture. The ground of the savannah is a chaotic acoustic environment. The heat rising from the baked earth creates turbulence, shimmering waves of air that distort sound. The thick mat of grass acts as a dampener, absorbing high frequencies and muffling the footsteps of the small. By lifting the head 5 feet into the air, our ancestors hoisted their ears out of the acoustic shadow of the ground. They placed their sensors in a clearer channel of air where sound could travel further with less distortion. We became walking watchtowers, our ears elevated above the noise floor of the grass, capable of capturing the low-rolling sounds of herds moving miles away. This elevation came with a price. By standing up, we exposed ourselves. We became visible. We became silhouettes against the sky. In the forest, we were hidden. On the plains, we were targets. This vulnerability drove the evolution of our hearing even further. We could not afford to miss a sound. The ear had to become a discriminator, a sophisticated filter capable of separating the signal from the noise. Deep within the spiral of the cochlea, the microscopic hair cells began to specialize. In the jungle, the most critical sounds were often high-pitched, the squeak of a mouse, the shriek of a monkey. But on the savannah, the most critical sounds were lower, deeper. The roar of a lion is a low-frequency rumble that carries for miles, cutting through the wind. The thunder of a stampeding wildebeest herd is a vibration that hits the chest as much as the ear. And so, the human ear began to lose its sensitivity to the ultra-high frequencies. We drifted away from the hearing range of the dog and the bat. We settled into the mid-range, a specific band of frequencies between 2,000 and 5,000 hertz. This was not an accident. This was a tuning fork, struck by evolution, vibrating in harmony with a new and specific sound, the human voice. As the distances between us grew, as we ventured further apart to forage in the open, we needed to stay in contact. We could no longer rely on the grooming touch or the subtle facial expressions of the forest troop. We needed a contact call. We needed a sound that could cut through the hiss of the wind and the shimmer of the heat. The human voice evolved to inhabit this specific frequency pocket. It is a Goldilocks zone, low enough to travel far without being scattered by the wind, but high enough to carry distinct information. The ear co-evolved to match it. The shape of our ear canal, the resonance of the outer ear, even the mechanical stiffness of the middle ear bones, all of it shifted to amplify this specific range. We became biologically obsessed with the sound of our own kind. This is the origin of what scientists call the speech banana, the visual representation of the frequencies of human speech on an audiogram. It is the sweet spot of our hearing. We are hardwired to hear the human voice above all else. Even today, in a crowded restaurant, a modern cacophony that mimics the chaos of the wind, you can pick out the voice of your friend across the table. This is the cocktail party effect, and it is a gift from the savannah. It is the legacy of an ancestor who needed to hear the warning shout of a kin member over the roar of the gale. Let us walk a mile in the footprints of this ancestor. Picture a lone Homo erectus traversing the Turkana Basin. The sun is at its zenith, a white hole in the sky. The heat is a physical hammer. The grass is dry, brittle, whispering endlessly as the wind scours the plains. He is thirsty. He is looking for a tuber, a root, a scavenged carcass. He is alone, separated from the troop by a ridge of volcanic rock. The wind is his enemy. It buffets his ears, creating a turbulent roar that threatens to mask the approach of a leopard. He stops. He turns his head. Unlike the mobile, swiveling ears of the Jurassic ancestor, his ears are relatively fixed. He cannot rotate them to scan behind him. He must rotate his entire head. This is a slower, more deliberate action. It requires the integration of the neck muscles and the vestibular system, the balance organs in the inner ear. Here, we see the profound link between walking and hearing. The semicircular canals, deep inside the skull, are fluid-filled tubes that tell the brain where the head is in space. As he walks, his head bobs with a rhythmic cadence. The brain must mathematically subtract this motion from the auditory signal. If it didn't, the world would sound like it was bouncing. He stands still. The wind dies down for a brief, miraculous second. In that gap of silence, the filter of the ear opens wide. He hears the distant lowing of a buffalo. Too far. He hears the dry rattle of seed pods. Irrelevant. And then, he hears it. Or rather, he hears the absence of it. In the patch of acacia scrub to his left, the birds have stopped singing. The francolins, ground-dwelling birds that usually scratch and cluck in the underbrush, have gone silent. This is the negative data of the savannah. In the forest, danger was often announced by an alarm call, a shriek from above. On the plains, danger is often announced by a hole in the soundscape. The predator is a silencer. As the lion moves through the grass, it pushes a wave of quiet ahead of it. The insects stop buzzing. The birds freeze. Our ancestors' brain, tuned to the baseline rhythm of the environment, detects this drop in volume. It is a glitch in the matrix of sound. The silence is louder than the roar. He freezes. He scans the grass. The golden stalks are swaying, but one patch is moving against the wind. The visual cortex and the auditory cortex fuse their data. The silence of the birds plus the counter-movement of the grass equals death. He slowly backs away, his hand gripping a crude stone flake. He does not run yet. Running triggers the chase response. He retreats, step by quiet step, keeping his ears locked on the zone of silence. This is the daily reality of the tuning. It was a high-stakes game of acoustic hide-and-seek played on a two-dimensional board of infinite size. The ear was the primary defensive weapon. It was the radar that could see through the grass. But the savannah was not just a place of fear. It was also a place of new, complex beauty. The open spaces allowed for the travel of low-frequency sound over vast distances, especially at night. Imagine the troop gathering at twilight. The fire has not yet been fully mastered, or perhaps it is just a flicker of gathered embers. The sun sets, and the thermal layers of the atmosphere flip. The cooling ground creates a sound channel near the surface, allowing voices to carry for miles. This is the time of the story, the time of the song. The human voice, tuned to the ear, became a tool for binding the group together. On the open plains where individuals could be scattered during the day, the night was for acoustic reassembly. We used sound to bridge the physical distance. We hummed, we chanted, we called. The rhythm of these early vocalizations likely mimicked the rhythm of the walk. Bipedalism creates a 1-2, 1-2 beat in the body. The breath couples with the step. Our music, our poetry, our very language is rooted in this walking rhythm. The iambic pentameter of Shakespeare is, at its core, the rhythm of a human walking across the African plain. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. The ear loved this rhythm. It was the sound of the tribe. It was the sound of safety. As the millennia passed, the architecture of the ear continued to refine. The pinna, our outer ear, lost its ability to swivel, but it gained a complex, crinkled shape. These folds, the helix, the antihelix, are not random wrinkles. They are precise acoustic baffles. They filter sound in a way that allows the brain to determine elevation. Even without moving our ears, we can tell if a sound is coming from above or below based on how the sound waves bounce off these cartilage ridges. This was crucial for a creature living on the ground but threatened by eagles from above and snakes from below. The ear became a localized GPS system, pinning sounds to a 3D map of the world. But perhaps the most poetic adaptation was the development of the acoustic dampening reflex. When we speak, or when we shout, the muscles in our middle ear, the tensor tympani and the stapedius, contract. They stiffen the chain of bones, reducing the volume of our own voice so we don't deafen ourselves. This is a biological courtesy. It allows us to roar without breaking our own ears. But more importantly, it allows us to hear while we are making noise. It gives us the ability to monitor our own output, to tune our pitch to match the group. It is the biological basis of harmony. The tuning of the savannah was not just about hearing the lion. It was about hearing the we. It was about shifting from the solitary listener of the burrow to the collective listener of the tribe. In the vast open auditorium of the grasslands, we learned that we were small. The sky was too big, the horizon too far. The wind was too indifferent. Alone, we were nothing but a brief ripple in the grass, easily silenced by a single bite. But together, linked by the invisible tether of the voice, connected by an ear tuned to the specific frequency of human need, we were formidable. We could coordinate. We could warn. We could comfort. The savannah stripped away the shelter of the trees, but it gave us the shelter of sound. It forced us to build a home not out of branches, but out of frequencies. We built a wall of words and songs to keep the dark at bay. So the next time you step out onto a windy beach or stand in a wide, open field, and you feel the urge to shout, to hear your voice carry over the distance, know that this is an ancient impulse. It is the ghost of the Rift Valley. It is the memory of an ancestor standing tall in the golden grass, shouting into the wind, checking to see if anyone is listening, and waiting with bated breath for the answer to return. The ear is a cup that holds the ocean of the air, and on the Savannah, we learn to drink from it together. This chapter of our history ends not with a mutation, but with a realization. We realized that in the silence of the Great Plains, the most important sound was not the thunder, nor the wind, nor the roar of the beast. The most important sound was the voice of another human being, and we tuned our entire biology to ensure we would never miss it. In the vast, silent library of the body, where every bone and sinew tells a story of survival, there is one chapter written in the ink of pure risk. It is a story not of strength, nor of armor, but of a profound and dangerous opening. As we leave the sun-drenched auditorium of the Savannah and turn our gaze inward to the architecture of the throat, we encounter a biological mystery that defies the cautious logic of evolution. It is the story of how we lost the safety of the breath to gain the magic of the song. Picture, if you will, the interior landscape of an ancestor living 2 million years ago. The body is a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering. In nearly every mammal that walks the earth, from the great elephants of the plains to the chimpanzees swaying in the canopy, the throat is designed with a rigid protective separation. The larynx, that box of cartilage that houses the vocal cords, sits high in the neck. It acts as a snorkel, locking firmly into the back of the nasal cavity. This is a design of supreme utility. It allows the gazelle to lower its head to the waterhole and drink deeply, while simultaneously scanning the horizon for predators, breathing the scent of the wind without interruption. The path of the water and the path of the air are separate highways, never crossing, never conflicting. It is a fail-safe system, ensuring that the primary imperative of life, respiration, is never threatened by the second imperative, nutrition. But in the lineage of the genus Homo, the lineage that would eventually lead to you lying there in the dark, this ancient safety protocol was abandoned. It began slowly, as all great changes do, a silent error in the code of life that whispered through the generations. The skull was reshaping itself. The face was flattening, pulling back from the heavy muzzle of the primate into the vertical profile of the human. As the jaw receded and the brain case expanded to house a mind that was becoming increasingly obsessed with the abstract, the geometry of the neck was forced to compromise. The larynx began to slide. Gravity, time, and genetic drift pulled it downward. The hyoid bone, a delicate horseshoe-shaped anchor floating in the muscles of the neck, drifted lower. The cartilage box of the voice, the Adam's apple, descended from its high perch near the nose and settled deep in the throat, opposite the cervical vertebrae. This was the Great Descent. It was a structural collapse that created a gaping cavern at the back of the mouth, the pharynx. To an engineer, this looks like a disaster. By lowering the larynx, evolution created a crossroads. The esophagus, the tube for food, and the trachea, the tube for air, now intersected. The separation was gone. Every time our ancestors swallowed a piece of roasted meat, or a handful of berries, or a draught of water, the substance had to pass directly over the open abyss of the lungs. The only thing standing between life and death was a tiny flap of tissue, the epiglottis, slamming shut in a fraction of a second. This is the evolutionary duality in its most stark and terrifying form. We are the only animals that can easily choke to death on our own dinner. Every meal became a game of Russian roulette. Throughout history, countless individuals, children, elders, the strong and the weak alike, have been silenced by a misplaced seed or a poorly chewed piece of gristle. It is a fatal flaw, a vulnerability so glaring that it demands an explanation. Why would nature, the ruthless optimizer, allow such a defect to persist? Why sacrifice the safety of the breath? The answer lies in the wind. The descent of the larynx opened up a vertical tube, a resonant chamber of flesh and air that did not exist before. In the high larynx throat of a chimp, the vocal tract is short and flat. It can produce sounds, hoots, screams, pant hoots, but it cannot shape them. The sound waves rush out of the mouth before they have time to resonate. It is like blowing into a trumpet with no tubing. The sound is raw and unrefined. But the lowered larynx created a cathedral. The pharynx is a hollow space, a biological amphitheater located just behind the tongue. When the breath rises from the lungs and vibrates the vocal cords, the sound now enters this chamber. Here, it can be molded, it can be stretched, it can be colored. This was the forging of the first true musical instrument. Imagine the first time an ancestor, perhaps a Homo heidelbergensis, realized the potential of this new anatomy. It is twilight on the edge of the Okavango Delta. The fire is burning low, casting long, dancing shadows against the acacia trees. The wind has died down. The air is still. This ancestor opens his mouth, not to bark a warning, not to grunt in aggression, but simply to push air through this new, elongated tube. He moves his tongue. The tongue is the unsung hero of this transformation. With the larynx pulled down, the back of the tongue was dragged with it, forming the front wall of the pharynx. The tongue was no longer just a flat muscle for pushing food. It became a thick, globular acrobat, capable of moving in 3 dimensions. It could arch up to touch the roof of the mouth. It could pull back to constrict the throat. It could flatten or curl. The ancestor hums. He shapes the breath. He discovers that by changing the shape of his throat, he can change the quality of the sound without changing the pitch. He discovers the vowels. Ah, e, o, oo. These sounds, the cardinal vowels, are the cornerstones of human speech. They are acoustically distinct, carrying different frequencies that the ear, which we tuned in the last chapter, is perfectly designed to catch. No other animal can produce this range. A chimp can make a sound roughly like an U, but it cannot produce the sharp, clear I, as in beat, or the open A, as in father. This ability to produce distinct vowels was the source code of language. It allowed us to digitize the analog stream of sound. We could string these vowels together, separated by the percussive clicks and hisses of consonants, to create an infinite variety of words. But before there were words, there was something else. There was the lost history of mimicry. The title of our story refers to this forgotten purpose. We often think of the voice as a tool for speaking about the world. There is a lion. Give me the water. But originally, the voice was likely used to be the world. With this new, flexible instrument, we became the great synthesizers of the wild. We were the only animal capable of synthesizing the sounds of the environment. Imagine the hunters of the Pleistocene, moving silently through the tall grass. They need to coordinate, but they cannot shout. Instead, they use the instrument of the throat to borrow the voices of the birds, a whistle that mimics the starling, a click that mimics the gecko, a low hum that mimics the wind in the dry reeds. We could copy the lion. We could copy the thunder. We could copy the rushing river. This was a form of acoustic camouflage. We dissolved our human identity into the soundscape. We captured the spirit of the wild and released it through the throat. This is a profound connection to nature that we have largely lost in the modern world of sterile language. When we speak today, we use arbitrary symbols. The word tree sounds nothing like a tree. But in the deep past, the sound for wind might have been a rushing exhalation that mimicked the gale. The sound for snake might have been a sibilant hiss that mirrored the sliding scales. The voice was a bridge between the internal world of the mind and the external world of reality. It was a way of pulling the outside in and pushing the inside out. Let us deepen the context of this transformation. The descent of the larynx did not happen in a vacuum. It happened alongside the mastery of fire. As we discussed, the firelight pushed back the darkness and created a circle of safety. In this circle, the need for loud, aggressive projection diminished. The campfire voice emerged, a softer, more modulated tone suitable for storytelling and bonding. The descended larynx allowed for a phenomenon called formant tuning. By subtly adjusting the shape of the throat, a speaker could make their voice sound larger, deeper, and more resonant than their body size would suggest. This is the voice of God effect. Male humans in particular evolved a secondary descent of the larynx at puberty, creating the deep, booming voice of adulthood. In the flickering light of the cave, a storyteller with a deep, resonant voice could hold the tribe in a trance. This was the birth of authority. The leader was no longer just the strongest fighter. The leader was the one who could control the airwaves, the one who could weave a tapestry of sound that bound the group together in a shared dream. But let us not forget the cost, the shadow of the choke. Every time you eat, your body performs a terrifying acrobatic feat. A complex sequence of muscles must fire in perfect order. The soft palate lifts to seal off the nose. The larynx shoots upward, reclaiming its ancient position for a brief second, to hide under the tongue. The epiglottis folds down like a trap door over the windpipe. The vocal cords clamp shut. For a split second, you are not breathing. You are suspended in a state of apnea. The food slides past the danger zone, into the esophagus, and only then does the system reset. The trapdoor opens, the larynx drops, the breath returns. We do this thousands of times a day, usually without a thought. But the silent errors happen. The neurological timing misfires. The trapdoor is a millisecond too slow, and suddenly the panic sets in. The coughing fit, the watering eyes, the desperate struggle to clear the airway. This is the memory of the gamble. It is a reminder that your ability to say, "I love you," or to sing a lullaby, or to argue a point of philosophy was purchased with the risk of death. Nature wagered your life against your voice, and it decided that the voice was worth it. Why? Because the voice allowed for a new kind of survival. A survival based not on teeth and claws, but on information. With the complex sound made possible by the descended larynx, we could transmit knowledge across time. We could tell a child about a danger they had never seen. We could explain how to make a tool that had not yet been invented. We created a superbrain. Individual humans are smart, but they are fragile. A tribe of humans, connected by the high-bandwidth data stream of complex speech, is invincible. The voice allowed us to network our minds. It allowed us to think together. The larynx became the loom upon which the fabric of culture was woven. Consider the day in the life of a mother in the Paleolithic era. She is carrying her infant in a sling of woven grass. The baby is fussing, restless with teething. The mother cannot stop foraging. She needs to gather tubers for the evening meal. In a primate world, she would have to put the food down to comfort the child with touch. But she has a new tool. She keeps her hands on the digging stick, but she engages her throat. She drops her larynx, shapes her pharynx, and begins to hum. A low, rhythmic, resonant sound. A lullaby. The sound travels through the air, enters the baby's ear, that tuned receiver, and triggers a cascade of calming hormones. The baby recognizes the vibration. It is the sound of the mother's body, projected across the distance. The baby settles. The mother continues to work. This is the power of the descended larynx. It is action at a distance. It is a third hand, an invisible limb that can comfort, warn, and control. As we moved out of Africa and into the cold latitudes of the Ice Age, the voice became even more critical. In the long, dark winters of the glacial period, when the sun barely rose and the world was locked in ice, the voice was the source of warmth. We huddled together in caves. and we filled the darkness with sound. We sang. The archaeological evidence suggests that early humans had a profound relationship with acoustics. They sought out the most resonant parts of the caves to paint their masterpieces. They were singing to the rock. The descended larynx allowed them to match the resonant frequency of the cave, creating a feedback loop where the voice and the earth seemed to merge. This was the first religion, the belief that the voice could alter reality. And in a way, it could. It altered the reality of the social group. It turned a collection of frightened individuals into a unified force. So, as you lie here tonight, listening to the sound of these words, consider the instrument that is producing them. Consider the instrument in your own throat. It is a biological oddity. It is a scar of evolution, a dangerous displacement of bone and cartilage that defied the logic of the animal kingdom. Swallow. Feel the click and slide of the Adam's apple. Feel the momentary pause of the breath. That is the echo of the gamble. And then, breathe. Feel the air rush down the open channel, past the relaxed vocal cords, into the lungs. Think of the potential that lies dormant in that channel. You have a cathedral in your neck. You have the ability to shape the invisible air into thoughts, into emotions, into music. We are the species that choked on an apple to gain the knowledge of good and evil, or at least the ability to speak of it. We are the animals who traded the safety of the swallow for the beauty of the song. And in the silence of the night, that trade feels like a victory. The wind outside is just wind. The thunder is just thunder. But the voice? The voice is the spirit of the wild, captured, tamed, and given a soul. It is the sound of the universe becoming conscious of itself, one vowel at a time. The forest is a distant memory now, a green smudge on the horizon that belongs to the past. We are standing in the crucible of the Pleistocene, on the vast baking anvil of the African Savannah. It is high noon. The sun is not merely a celestial body here. It is a physical weight, a hammer of white light that strikes the earth with relentless fury. The heat rises in shimmering waves, distorting the air until the acacia trees in the distance look like they are melting into the sky. Most animals have surrendered to this tyranny. The lions, the leopards, the hyenas, they are all asleep, panting in the deep shade, conserving every ounce of moisture, waiting for the mercy of the dusk. The savanna is silent, suspended in a state of solar paralysis. But in this shimmering silence there is a movement, an anomaly, a dark, upright shape detached from the shade, moving steadily through the furnace. And then another, and another. They are running, not with the explosive, desperate sprint of the gazelle, nor the terrifying burst of the cheetah. They are running with a terrifying mechanical slowness, a rhythmic, loping trot that eats the miles. They are sweat-slicked, their dark skin glistening like oil, cooling them in a way no other animal can be cooled. These are the persistence hunters. These are the rhythmic machines. These are us. On these sun-baked plains, a new sound began to dominate the human experience, a sound that would eventually separate us from every other creature on Earth. The rhythm of the body in motion. To understand the birth of music, we must first understand the mechanics of the hunt. We did not begin as musicians. We began as engines of endurance. When our ancestors stood up and lost their fur, they gained the ability to shed heat through sweat. This allowed them to run during the hottest part of the day, chasing prey that would eventually collapse from hyperthermia. But to run for hours, to chase a kudu for 20 miles under a vertical sun, requires more than just sweat glands. It requires a trance. It requires a synchronization of the mind and the body that borders on the spiritual. Picture the anatomy of this run. The foot strikes the hard, dry earth. Thud. The shock wave travels up the tibia, through the knee, into the hip. The body absorbs the impact, the tendons stretching like rubber bands, storing elastic energy. Then, the recoil, the push-off, the flight phase. For a split second, the human is airborne, suspended between steps. Then, the other foot strikes. thud, 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 thud. This is not just a physical action, it is an acoustic event. Deep inside the skull of the running hunter, the world sounds different. The inner ear, that ancient seashell we have spoken of, is now being bombarded by the internal sounds of the body. When you run, your body becomes a drum. The impact of your feet against the ground transmits a low-frequency vibration directly through the skeleton to the cochlea. This is bone conduction. It is a deep, resonant booming that fills the head. At the same time, the heart is pounding. In the heat of the chase, the heart rate rises to 150, 160, 170 beats per minute. The blood rushes through the carotid arteries, which pass right next to the ear canal. Lub-dub, lub-dub. The sound is deafeningly loud in the internal isolation of the skull. It is a relentless, driving techno beat, a biological drum and bass that never stops. And then, the breath. To sustain this effort, the breath must lock into the rhythm of the step. This is called locomotor respiratory coupling. The runner inhales for 2 steps, exhales for 2 steps. In, out, out. In, out, out. The breath becomes a percussion instrument, a bellows fanning the fire of the metabolism. This synchronization, the locking of the foot, the heart, and the lung into a single unified rhythm, is the physiological metronome of our species. It is a trance-inducing drum that clicked for hours under the relentless sun. We often wonder where the human sense of rhythm comes from. Why does a drum beat make us want to move? Why does a steady tempo soothe us or excite us? The answer lies here, in the dust of the Great Rift Valley. The ability to entrain, to lock our movements to a beat, was not born in a dance hall or a temple. It was born in the necessity of the chase. To fall out of rhythm was to fail. If the breath decoupled from the step, the energy cost would spike. The stitch in the side would appear. The heat would overwhelm the brain. The runner would falter, and the prey would escape. To survive, the hunter had to become the rhythm. They had to surrender their conscious mind to the repetitive, hypnotic loop of the body. Imagine a day in the life of this hunt. It is the era of Homo erectus. A small band of hunters has isolated a large antelope, perhaps an eland, separating it from the herd. The chase has been going on for 3 hours. The animal is faster, sprinting away into the distance, but it cannot sweat. It must stop to pant. Every time it finds a patch of shade, the hunters appear on the horizon, jogging with that terrifying, inexorable rhythm. They force it to run again. The lead hunter is exhausted. His muscles are burning with lactic acid. His throat is parched, coated in the dust of the savannah. His mind wants to quit. The pain is a sharp, screaming voice in his head telling him to lie down. But he is not running alone. Beside him, shoulder to shoulder, runs his brother. He can hear the heavy slap of his brother's feet against the hardpan. He can hear the rasping, rhythmic grunt of his brother's breath. Ha-ha-ha. Ha-ha-ha. And something miraculous happens. The sound of his brother's rhythm enters his ears and bypasses his conscious brain. It travels directly to the motor cortex. His own legs begin to lock into phase with his brother's. His breath synchronizes. They are in training. This is the sonic bond. It is a shared frequency of effort that links the hunters into a single moving organism. When one man's will falters, the rhythm of the group carries him. He is pulled along by the acoustic wake of the others. He surrenders his individual suffering to the collective cadence. This is the era where sound became fuel. We tend to think of communication as words, instructions, commands, questions. But in the persistence hunt, there is no breath for words. You cannot discuss strategy while running a marathon in 40-degree heat. The communication must be primal. It must be rhythmic. The hunters developed a system of non-verbal signals, a sharp grunt to signal a change in direction, a rhythmic clapping of hands to startle the prey out of a thicket, a specific pattern of breathing to signal, "I am tired, take the lead." These sounds cut through the exhaustion. They were the first work songs. Just as later, Humans would sing sea shanties to haul ropes in unison, or prison gangs would sing to swing hammers. These early hunters used sound to coordinate their physical exertion. The music was a tool to synchronize the energy of the group, to make the many act as one. Consider the evolutionary duality of this adaptation. To become a rhythmic animal is to become a powerful machine, but it is also to become a susceptible one. We are easily hijacked by rhythm. A steady beat can put us into a trance state where we ignore pain, ignore danger, ignore logic. This is why war drums are effective. This is why dance music can make us move until we collapse. We have a back door in our neurology, a rhythm port left open by the persistence hunt. It allowed us to push beyond physical limits. The trance of the run, guided by the acoustic feedback of breath and footfall, acted as an analgesic. It flooded the brain with endorphins and endocannabinoids, the runner's high. This chemical cocktail masked the agony of the blistered feet and the dehydration. It allowed the hunter to run until the prey died. But let us deepen the context. This was not just about running, it was about tracking. The persistence hunt is a cognitive marathon as well as a physical one. You lose sight of the prey, you have to read the ground. The hunter stops, the rhythm breaks. Silence rushes back in, deafening in its contrast. He kneels, he looks at a broken twig, he touches the dung. Is it warm? He listens. In this moment of pause, the internal drum of the heart is still pounding in his ears. Boom, 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 boom. He projects this internal rhythm onto the world. He imagines the rhythm of the antelope's hooves. He visualizes the path. This projection of rhythm, the ability to imagine a beat that is not there, is a crucial step toward music. It is the ability to keep time in the mind. And then, the chase resumes. The rhythm picks up. As the sun begins to dip, casting long, bruised shadows across the golden grass, the end game approaches. The antelope is staggering, its head is low, its tongue is lolling, foam dripping from its mouth. It is experiencing capture myopathy. Its muscles are dissolving from stress and heat. The hunters close in. They do not sprint. They maintain the rhythm. They are the grim reapers of the savannah, arriving not with a scream, but with a steady, unrelenting drumbeat of feet. When the animal finally collapses, it is not killed with a weapon from a distance. It is often dispatched with a rock or a spear at close range. The hunters surround it. They are heaving, their chests rising and falling in unison. The sound of their collective breathing is the loudest thing on the plain. They have succeeded. They have turned calories into meat. They have turned rhythm into survival. But the story of the rhythm does not end with the kill. It is carried back to the camp. Picture the night after a successful hunt. The tribe is gathered. The fire is lit. The meat is roasting. The scent of fat and protein driving the group into a frenzy of anticipation. The hunters are the heroes of the hour. They are exhausted, but they are also wired, their bodies still humming with the residual energy of the chase. How do they tell the story of the hunt? They do not have complex sentences yet. They do not have a written language. They reenact it. One hunter stands up. He begins to stomp his feet. Thud, 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 thud. He mimics the rhythm of the run. He makes the ha-ha sound of the breath. Another hunter joins him. They lock into the groove. They start to pantomime the tracking, the throwing of the spear. The women and children who did not run begin to clap. They catch the beat. The rhythm of the survival activity is transferred to the social activity. The work becomes the dance. This is the likely origin of the first ritual. The reenactment of the hunt through rhythmic movement and sound served a vital purpose. It taught the young the tempo of endurance. It bonded the group, allowing the non-hunters to participate in the emotion of the chase. It released the tension of the day. The internal drum that had pounded in the solitary isolation of the hunter's skull became the external drum of the tribe. They may have started hitting hollow logs or rocks to amplify the sound, creating the first percussion instruments to mimic the heartbeat of the runner. Scientific discovery supports this deep connection between motion and music. Neuroscientists have found that the parts of the human brain that process rhythm, the basal ganglia and the cerebellum, are the same parts that control motor movement. We do not just hear music, we feel it in our motor system. When you hear a beat, your brain is priming your muscles to move. You are preparing to run. You are preparing to hunt. Even the tempo of modern dance music, typically around 120 to 140 beats per minute, is not arbitrary. It corresponds roughly to the cadence of a human running at a moderate pace, or a human heart beating during exertion. We dance to the echo of the Pleistocene jog. We rave to the memory of the persistence hunt. But there is a darker, more poignant side to this history. The rhythm was born of suffering. It was born of the desperate need to ignore the body's warning signals. Think of the hunter who fell behind, the one whose rhythm broke, the one who could not entrain. He was left alone in the vastness of the savannah, vulnerable to the lions and the hyenas. The rhythm was a lifeline. To be in time was to be safe. To be out of time was to be dead. This deep-seated anxiety about being out of rhythm persists in us today. We feel a strange social awkwardness when we clap out of time at a concert. We feel a deep, primal satisfaction when we walk in step with a friend. It is a vestigial memory of the time when staying in step was the only thing keeping us alive. And consider the silence of the prey. The antelope has no rhythm. It runs in bursts. It zigzags. It has no metronome. It is chaos. The human is order. The human is the clock. The persistence hunt was the victory of order over chaos, of rhythm over arrhythmia. As the era of the persistence hunt faded and we developed better weapons, projectile spears, bows, and arrows, we no longer needed to run for hours to eat. The physical necessity of the trance diminished, but the psychological need remained. We had opened a door in the mind, a rhythmic dependency that could not be closed. We kept the drum, we kept the dance, we took the rhythm of the hunt, and we sanctified it. We used it to enter trance states for healing. We used it to prepare for war. We used it to woo mates. The physiological metronome that had been forged to track a kudu across the Kagalagadi was repurposed to track the mysteries of the spirit. So, the next time you go for a run, and you put on your headphones, and you feel that moment where the music locks into your step, and the pain in your legs seems to fade, and you feel like you could run forever, know that you are reenacting a ritual that is 2 million years old. You are not just exercising. You are tapping into an ancient biological technology. You are summoning the ghosts of the ancestors who ran until their hearts nearly burst, guided by the sound of their own breath and the thud of their brothers' feet. You are listening to the endurance of your kin. You are finding, in that shared rhythm, the will to continue. The sun sets on the savannah. The hunters return. The carcass of the eland carried between them. The rhythm of their feet slows to a walk, but the beat goes on. It beats in their chests. It beats in the womb of the pregnant mother waiting by the fire. It beats in the code of life, waiting for the next generation to stand up, to take a breath, and to begin the long, rhythmic run toward the future. The silence of the stone has become the song of the blood, and the song never stops. The sun has set on the Pleistocene. The great blinding eye of the day has closed, and the world has been reclaimed by the ancient, heavy sovereignty of the night. For millions of years, this moment, the crossing of the threshold from light to dark, was the time of the great retreat. It was the hour when the primate mind, wired for the visual clarity of the canopy or the savannah, felt the creeping paralysis of fear. To be a creature of the day in a world ruled by the Nocturnal was to be a ghost waiting to be consumed. The darkness was not empty. It was a solid wall of danger, prowled by the saber-tooth, the hyena, the invisible things that breathed in the shadows. For eons, the only strategy was silence. We climbed high into the cliffs or the trees. We huddled in the shivering damp, and we made ourselves small. We made ourselves quiet. To speak in the dark was to ring a dinner bell for the abyss. But then, in the deep time of our history, roughly 1 million years ago, a new star was born. Not in the sky, but on the earth. A human hand, calloused and trembling with purpose, struck flint against iron pyrite or spun a stick against a block of dry wood until the friction became heat and the heat became a spark. A single fragile orange flower bloomed in the dead grass. It grew. It ate the wood. It danced. Fire. The mastery of fire changed everything. It changed our digestion, allowing us to cook meat and grow our brains. It changed our sleep, allowing us to rest on the ground. But perhaps most profoundly, and most quietly, it changed the way we sounded. The mastery of fire brought an acoustic revolution that is still echoing in the intimate spaces of your life today. For the first time in the history of biology, light existed within the darkness. We had cut a hole in the night. We had created a circle of safety, an illuminated sphere of amber light that pushed back the terrors of the wild. This circle, perhaps only 10 feet across, was the first room. It was the first architecture of humanity, built not of walls, but of thermal energy and photons. And inside this room, the rules of the universe shifted. Outside the circle, the wind still howled. The lions still roared. The cold still bit at the edges of the world. But inside, the air was warm. The light was soft. And crucially, the volume of human existence lowered. Imagine the acoustic landscape of this first hearth. The fire itself is a sound. It is not silent. It pops. It hisses as the sap boils in the green wood. It crackles with a rhythmic, hypnotic percussion. This is a pink noise, a spectrum of sound that is naturally soothing to the brain. It masks the terrifying silence of the void outside. It creates a sonic curtain. Within this curtain, the need for the shout died. On the open savanna, during the hunt or the forage, communication had to be projected. It had to cut through the wind and the distance. It was loud, brash, functional. It was the voice of the far. But here, sitting shoulder to shoulder, knees touching, faces illuminated by the dancing flames, we discovered the voice of the near. We invented the whisper. This was a radical biological luxury. To whisper is to make oneself vulnerable. It is to reduce the signal strength of your communication to the barest minimum, trusting that the listener is close enough and attentive enough to catch it. It implies safety. You do not whisper when you are being chased. You do not whisper when you are fighting. You whisper when you are safe. The invention of the whisper required a new calibration of the larynx and the breath. The vocal cords, those two pearly bands of tissue in the throat, usually vibrate together to produce sound, but in a whisper, they are held slightly apart. The air passes through them with a turbulent hiss, shaped only by the tongue and the lips. It is speech stripped of its fundamental frequency. It is pure articulation. This new mode of speech selected for a new kind of hearing. The tuning of the savannah we spoke of earlier, the ear designed for the mid-range shout, now had to become the ear of the hearth. It had to become sensitive to the nuance, the breathiness, the subtle texture of the voice. In the flickering light where shadows danced across faces, masking expressions, the auditory system had to work harder to decode emotion. The social ear was perfected here. We learned to hear not just the command, but the tremor. We learned to detect the microscopic waver in a tone that signaled fear. We learned to hear the softening of the palate that signaled affection. The content of the sound, the information about where the water was or where the antelope were, became less important than the melody of the sound. This was the birth of prosody. Prosody is the musicality of speech. It is the rise and fall of pitch, the rhythm of the sentence, the stress on certain syllables. It is the difference between a robot saying, "I am fine," and a lover whispering, "I am fine." In the circle of the fire, language became music. Picture a night in the life of a tribe of Homo erectus or early Homo sapiens. The day has been brutal. The sun has blistered their skin. They have walked 20 miles. They have fled from a pack of hunting dogs. They have carried heavy stones. The body is exhausted. The muscles are tight with the residual tension of survival. But now, the fire is lit. The food has been shared. The darkness presses in, but it cannot touch them. The elders sit with their backs to the warmth. The children are curled in the dust, half asleep. An elder begins to speak. He does not shout. He hums. He starts low, a rumble in his chest that mimics the distant thunder. He is telling a story, not a report of the day, but a myth. A story about the moon, or the spirit of the buffalo, or the ancestor who stole the fire. He uses his voice like an instrument. When he describes the stalking leopard, his voice drops to a harsh, breathy rasp. The listeners lean in, their hearts synchronize. When he describes the escape, his voice rises, quickening, mimicking the frantic heartbeat of the run. And when he describes the safety of the cave, his voice becomes slow, melodic, rhythmic. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. This is the hypnotic rhythm of storytelling. It is a sedative. It smooths over the conflicts of the day. The arguments over food, the petty jealousies, the dominance hierarchies, all are dissolved in the shared acoustic bath of the story. The voice of the elder binds the group together. It aligns their emotional states. The fire became a stage. For the first time, humans had a theater. The lighting was dramatic, the updraft of the flames causing shadows to loom and shrink on the cave walls behind the speaker. The acoustics were intimate. The stone walls of the cave, or the wall of trees around the clearing, acted as a resonator, keeping the sound inside the circle. This environment fostered a deep sense of us versus them. Those who could hear the whisper were us. Those outside in the dark, the ones who could only hear the roar, were them. The whisper defined the boundary of the tribe. But let us look deeper into the biology of this intimacy. What happens to the body when it hears a low, soft voice by a fire? The vagus nerve is triggered. This massive nerve, wandering from the brainstem down to the heart and the gut, is the highway of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. High-pitched, loud, erratic sounds trigger the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response. They spike cortisol. They tense the muscles. But low-frequency, rhythmic, soft sounds, the sounds of the hearth, tell the vagus nerve that the danger has passed. The heart rate slows. The blood pressure drops. The digestion turns on. The body moves from a state of high alert to a state of restoration and repair. This is the evolutionary duality at play. We adapted to the harsh noise of the day for survival, but we required the soft noise of the night for recovery. If we had never invented the whisper, if we had never mastered the fire, we would have remained in a state of perpetual high stress. Our bodies would have burned out. The whisper of the hearth was a medical intervention. It was the first therapy. Consider the child in this scene. The human infant is born uniquely helpless. A foal can run within hours. A human baby cannot even lift its head. It requires years of care. This dependency creates a massive burden on the parents. The acoustic technology of the lullaby, which we touched on earlier, was perfected here by the fire. A mother, exhausted, holds her crying child. She cannot scream at it to stop. That would attract predators. She must soothe it. She leans close. She puts her mouth near the child's ear. She engages the social ear. She hums. The vibration travels through her chest, through the child's body. It mimics the womb. But she also whispers. She uses motherese, that universal sing-song language of exaggerated pitch and slow rhythm that parents use in every culture on earth. Hush now. Sleep now. Safe now. The firelight catches the mother's eyes. The baby stares at her face. The combination of the warm light, the radiant heat, the smell of wood smoke, and the soft melodic voice creates a powerful imprint. This is the sensory signature of love. To this day, we are wired to find this combination irresistible. Why do we pay a premium for candlelight dinners? Why do we find a crackling fireplace romantic? Why do we lower our voices when we want to be intimate? We are reenacting the Pleistocene night. We are trying to recreate the circle of safety where we first learned that we were not alone. But the whisper was not just for love. It was also for conspiracy. Language is a tool for information, but it is also a tool for politics. In the bright light of day, on the open savannah, everyone can hear what you are saying. You cannot plot. You cannot gossip. You cannot form alliances against the dominant alpha without being detected. But in the dark, by the fire, with the volume turned down. Did you see how he took the extra meat? We should go to the river tomorrow, just us. The whisper allowed for the development of complex social complexity. It allowed for secrets. It allowed for the creation of subgroups within the tribe. This Machiavellian intelligence hypothesis suggests that our brains grew so large not just to solve physical problems, how to crack a nut, but to solve social problems, who is allied with whom. The whisper was the medium of this social calculation. It added a layer of depth to human relations that did not exist when we were shouting across the grass. The whisper of the hearth also changed our relationship with the dead. In the firelight, the smoke rises and twists. It looks like spirits leaving the body. The shadows on the wall look like ghosts. The acoustics of the cave create strange echoes. It is easy to imagine that the ancestors are still there, sitting just outside the ring of light, listening. The elders would speak of them in hushed tones. My father told me, the old ones said, the oral tradition was forged here. History was not written in books. It was encoded in the prosody of the voice by the fire. The knowledge of how to make a spear, which berries to avoid, how to track a kudu, this was all compressed into rhythmic stories and songs that could be memorized and whispered from generation to generation. If the shout was the hardware of survival, the whisper was the software of culture. Let us pause and consider the specific setting of a great Rift Valley evening, perhaps 100,000 years ago. The species is Homo sapiens, newly emerged, anatomically modern. They have the same throat as you, the same ears. The fire is built of acacia wood, which burns hot and slow. The smell is distinctive, acrid, sweet, peppery. It hangs in the air, clinging to their hair and skin. This scent, the smell of wood smoke, is the oldest perfume of humanity. Even today, the smell of smoke triggers a deep, atavistic nostalgia in us. It smells like home. A young hunter is cleaning a flint scraper. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound is rhythmic, quiet. A mother is nursing. The sound of the baby swallowing. Gulp, gulp. The fire pops, snap. These are the micro sounds of the hearth. In a loud world, they would be lost. But here, they are the texture of life. The brain maps them. It learns that scritch means tools are being made, survival. It learns that gulp means the baby is fed, continuity. It learns that snap means the fire is healthy, warmth. Then a noise from outside. A branch breaks in the dark. Crack. The circle goes silent, instantly. The social ear shuts off. The survival ear turns on. The whisper dies. Every head turns. The eyes widen, trying to pierce the veil of the night. This contrast, the extreme safety of the circle versus the extreme danger of the void, sharpened our psychological duality. We became creatures of the threshold. We loved the light, but we respected the dark. We loved the whisper, but we feared the silence. And what of the genetic accidents that allowed this? There is a gene called FOXP2. It is often called the language gene, though that is a simplification. It is involved in the fine motor control of the mouth and the larynx. Somewhere in our history, a mutation in this gene allowed for the rapid, precise movements of the tongue required for complex speech. But perhaps there were other, subtler mutations. Mutations in the auditory cortex that made us more sensitive to the emotional timbre of a voice. Mutations in the limbic system that wired the sound of a soothing voice directly to our stress reduction pathways. These were the silent errors that made us the storytelling ape. We didn't just survive the night, we filled it with meaning. We took the terror of the darkness, and we tamed it with words. As the eras passed, the hearth evolved. It moved from the open plains to the cave mouth. The acoustics changed again. The cave amplified the low frequencies. A hum by the fire in a cave resonates against the stone, making the speaker sound powerful, magical. Then the hearth moved into the hut. The Neolithic revolution brought walls, roofs. The circle of safety became permanent. The whisper of the hearth became the conversation at the table. But the function remained the same. It is the place where the volume drops. It is the place where the armor comes off. In the modern world, we have largely lost the true darkness. Our nights are bleached by electricity. We do not need the fire to see. We do not need the whisper to be safe. We have locks and alarms. And yet, the legacy remains. Think about how you speak when you are in a loud club or a busy street. You shout. You use simple words. You are armored. Now think about how you speak when you are in bed, in the dark, with someone you trust. Your voice drops. It becomes breathy. The pitch lowers. The rhythm slows. You are returning to the Pleistocene. You are returning to the fire. The lost history of sound is not just about the mechanics of the ear or the bone. It is about the emotion of the voice. We tuned ourselves to each other. We built a sanctuary of sound in the middle of a hostile universe. And the most powerful tool in that sanctuary was not the shout that scared away the lion. It was the whisper that told the child, "You are safe. I am here. Sleep." As you listen to this now, in the quiet of your own space, recognize that this very act, listening to a calm, slow voice in the dark, is a ritual. It is a digital campfire. You are tapping into a comfort mechanism that is 1,000,000 years old. The wood has turned to wire, the fire to pixels, but the need is the same. We need to hear the voice in the dark. We need to know that someone is keeping watch. We need the whisper to push back the night. So let the fire crackle in your mind. Smell the wood smoke. Feel the warmth on your face. And let the sounds of the day, the traffic, the notifications, the demands, fade into the silence of the savannah. You are in the circle now. The volume is low. You are safe. The sun has long since abandoned the sky, leaving the world to the encroaching sovereignty of the ice. We are in the deep grip of the Pleistocene, perhaps 20,000 years ago, in a landscape that defies the modern conception of comfort. It is a world of absolutes, absolute cold, absolute dark, and absolute silence. Outside the small, fragile sanctuary of the cave mouth, the wind scours the tundra, whistling through the ribs of fallen mammoths and polishing the stones of the riverbed until they are as smooth as bone. The snow is not the soft, decorative dusting of a winter postcard. It is a hard, granulated armor that covers the earth, locking away the scents and the trails of the living. Here, in this frozen cathedral of the night, silence is not merely a lack of sound. It is a shield. It is the primary defense of the vulnerable. For in the darkness, beyond the flickering reach of the dying embers, the listeners are waiting. The cave hyena, with jaws capable of crushing the femur of a bison. The saber-toothed cat, a silent ghost of muscle and claw. The dire wolf, hunting in packs with a coordination that rivals our own. They are patrolling the perimeter of the human world, their ears swiveling, tuning into the frequencies of the night, waiting for a signal. And in the center of the cave, wrapped in the furs of wolf and reindeer, a crisis is brewing. It is a biological alarm that threatens to shatter the safety of the tribe. an infant wakes. The human infant is a creature of profound paradox. It is the hope of the future, the vessel of the genes, the reason for the struggle. Yet, in this moment, it is the single greatest liability to the group. Unlike the foal of the horse or the calf of the wildebeest, which can stand and run within hours of birth, the human child is born altricial, unfinished, helpless, and utterly dependent. Its brain is still growing. Its nervous system is a raw, exposed wire. It cannot reason. It cannot understand the concept of a predator. It knows only its own immediate visceral needs: hunger, cold, fear. And so it prepares to do the only thing it can do. It prepares to cry. The cry of a human infant is one of the most piercing, acoustically distinct sounds in nature. It is evolved to be impossible to ignore. It occupies a specific frequency range, around 3,000 to 4,000 hertz, that cuts through background noise and triggers an immediate, panic-inducing spike in the cortisol levels of any adult within earshot. It is a biological siren, a scream for help that is designed to override every other priority in the parent's brain. But in the Stone Age night, this siren is a death sentence. To let a baby cry for even a minute is to broadcast the location of the tribe to every predator within a mile. It is a beacon of vulnerability, signaling to the wolves that here, in this cave, there is something small, weak, and defenseless. The mother knows this. She does not know it with her intellect. She knows it with her blood. As the baby squirmed in the furs, drawing in that sharp intake of breath that precedes the wail, the mother's heart hammers against her ribs. She feels the adrenaline flood her system. She must stop the sound. She must extinguish the beacon before it lights up the acoustic map of the predators. She cannot reason with the child. She cannot explain the wolf. She cannot negotiate. She has to hack the biology of the infant. She has to use a technology that is older than fire, older than the spear, older perhaps than language itself. She pulls the child close, pressing its small, frantic body against the warmth of her chest. She lowers her face to the soft, pulsing fontanelle of the baby's skull, and she begins to hum. This moment, this desperate, tender intervention in the dark, is the birth of the lullaby. It is not a performance. It is not art. It is a survival mechanism as critical as the flint knife or the fire starter. It is the acoustic modulation of the nervous system. Let us slow down and examine the physics of this interaction, for it is here, in the biography of the body, that we see the genius of evolution at work. The mother does not speak. Speech is too complex, too cognitive. The baby does not need information. It needs regulation. The mother chooses a sound that is low, repetitive, and resonant. Why low? High frequencies are alerting. They mimic the cry of the bird or the shriek of the prey. Low frequencies are soothing. They mimic the rumble of the earth, the flow of the river, the groan of the safe, heavy things. Why repetitive? The infant brain is chaotic, overwhelmed by the sensory input of the cold air and the rough fur. Repetition creates predictability. It creates a pattern. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. The brain latches onto this pattern. It predicts the next beat. When the prediction is met, the brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine. The chaos recedes. Order is restored. But the true magic lies in the vibration. When the mother hums, she is not just creating sound waves in the air. She is turning her own chest cavity into a resonance chamber. The sound travels through her sternum, through her ribs, and directly into the body of the child pressed against her. This is tactile sound. The baby feels the song as much as it hears it. The vibration penetrates the deep tissues, massaging the vagus nerve, that great wandering highway of the parasympathetic nervous system. This nerve is the brake pedal of the body. When stimulated by the low-frequency vibration of the mother's hum, it sends a chemical message to the infant's heart. Slow down. The danger is over. You are held. This is biology hacking biology. The mother is using her voice to reach inside the child's chest and manually lower its heart rate. She is using sound to synchronize their biological clocks, pulling the infant out of the high-alert state of distress and down into the slow, rhythmic waves of sleep. But there is a deeper layer to this mystery. Why does this specific sound, the rhythmic, whooshing, humming sound, work so universally? Why do mothers in the Amazon rainforest, the Arctic tundra, and the modern metropolis all instinctively use the same acoustic structures to soothe their young? To answer this, we must travel back in time, not just to the Stone Age, but to the very beginning of the individual life. We must return to the womb. For 9 months, before the first breath of cold air, before the first sight of the moon, every human being exists in a world of water. The uterus is not a silent place. It is a loud, rhythmic, industrial environment. It is dominated by the sound of the mother's body. Imagine the soundscape of the fetus. The background noise is the biosphere of the mother's blood rushing through the uterine arteries, a constant rhythmic whoosh-whoosh that sounds like waves crashing on a shore. Overlaid on this is the percussive thud of the mother's heart, a heavy, steady drumbeat that never stops. Lub-dub, lub-dub. And filtering through the fluid, muffled but distinct, is the mother's voice. Because the fetus is floating in water and the mother's voice is produced by her own body, the sound travels through the bones of the spine and the pelvis, amplifying the lower frequencies. The fetus hears the melody of the mother's voice long before it understands the words. It learns the rhythm of her speech, the cadence of her emotions. This acoustic imprint is the first memory of every human being. It is the soundtrack of safety. It is the default mode of existence, warm, fed, held, and surrounded by the rhythmic pulse of another life. Then comes the trauma of birth. The baby is pushed out of the warm ocean and into the cold, dry, gravity-heavy world of the air. The lights are too bright. The sounds are too sharp. The separation is absolute. The continuous hug of the uterine wall is gone. The constant drumbeat of the heart is gone. The silence of the world is terrifying. This is why the lullaby works. It is a sonic reconstruction of the womb. When the Stone Age mother holds her baby close and says, "shh," she is not just making a random noise. The sound "shh" is a form of white noise. Spectrographically, it is almost identical to the sound of blood rushing through the placenta. When the baby hears "shh," it is hearing the ghost of its aquatic past. It is hearing the sound of the life support system. When the mother rocks the baby, she is mimicking the swaying motion of the womb as the mother walked through the landscape. When she hums, she is replicating the low-frequency vibration of her voice traveling through the amniotic fluid. The lullaby is a virtual reality simulation. It tricks the infant's brain into believing it hasn't left the safety of the mother's body. It bridges the terrifying gap between the two worlds. It tells the ancient reptilian part of the baby's brain, "You are not alone in the cold. You are still part of me." Let us visualize a specific night in the life of our ancestors to see this technology in action. The setting is the Dordogne Valley in what is now France, 30,000 years ago. The tribe has taken shelter in a limestone overhang. The fire has burned down to a bed of glowing, breathing coals, casting a faint red light on the soot-stained ceiling. A mother, let us call her Ilara, sits with her back against the rough stone. She is exhausted. Her hands are calloused from scraping hides. Her legs ache from the long trek to the river. In her arms, her newborn begins to stir. The face scrunches, the tiny fists clench. The prelude to the cry. Ilara reacts instantly. She shifts the baby to her left side. This is a universal human bias. Between 70 and 85% of mothers, regardless of handedness, cradle their infants on the left. Why? Because the heart is on the left. By placing the baby there, she aligns the infant's ear with her heartbeat. She gives the baby the drum. She begins the ritual. She rocks her torso back and forth, a metronomic sway that mimics the walking gait. She takes a deep breath, expanding her diaphragm, and releases a long, slow, vibrating hum. Ah-oh. She does not sing complex lyrics. She uses motherese, infant-directed speech. Her pitch rises, becoming musical and exaggerated. Her vowels stretch out. This is not language, it is emotion encoded as sound. As she sings, a profound chemical reaction begins to take place. It is invisible, but it is as powerful as the fire. In the baby's brain, the sound of the mother's voice triggers the release of endogenous opioids, natural painkillers and sedatives. The cortisol levels crash. The heart rate, which had spiked in distress, begins to entrain with the rhythm of the mother's song. The breathing slows. The clenched fists relax, the fingers uncurling like blooming flowers. But the chemistry is not one-sided. This is a sonic tether, and a tether binds two ends. As Ilara sings, the vibration in her own chest and the smell of the baby's head trigger the release of oxytocin in her own bloodstream. This is the hormone of attachment, the chemical of love and trust. It floods her brain, washing away the exhaustion of the day, dampening her own anxiety about the wolves outside. The lullaby soothes the singer as much as the listener. It puts the mother into a light trance state, a meditative focus where the rest of the world falls away, and only the child exists. In this shared acoustic bubble, the bond between them is forged. This bond is the most important survival strategy of the human species. A human child requires years of sacrifice to raise. Without this deep, chemically reinforced emotional tether, the parents might abandon the burden. The lullaby creates the love that ensures the survival of the lineage. Generations fade into dust, yet the trait remains. The wolves of the Pleistocene evolved into the domestic dogs that sleep at our feet, but the biological imperative of the lullaby remained unchanged. The context shifted from the cave to the hut, from the hut to the house, but the mechanism is identical. Consider the evolutionary duality here. The very thing that made us vulnerable, our helpless vocal infants, drove the evolution of our most tender and complex emotional capabilities. The danger of the cry forced us to invent the beauty of the song. We became musicians because we had to be silencers. We became creatures of love because the alternative was death. There is a haunting beauty in the realization that the melody you hum to a child today is an ancient artifact. It is an acoustic fossil. When a modern father walks the floorboards of a suburban house at 3 a.m., rocking his crying daughter and making that rhythmic shh sound, he is reenacting a scene that has played out uninterrupted for hundreds of thousands of years. He is tapping into a silent error in the code of life. The fact that we are born too soon, born before we are ready, and he is correcting it with sound. The melody of safety was written into our genes. It explains why, even as adults, we find the sound of rain, white noise, soothing. It explains why we find slow, rhythmic music relaxing. It explains why, when we are hurt or grieving, we rock back and forth. We are trying to self-soothe. We are trying to sing the lullaby to ourselves. We are trying to get back to the womb. Let us return to the cave one last time. The baby has fallen asleep. The beacon has been extinguished. The silence of the cave returns, but it is a different kind of silence now. It is not the empty, terrifying silence of the void. It is a silence that has been filled briefly with the assertion of care. Ilara stops humming. She listens. She hears the wind outside, the distant howl of the pack. They are still there. The world is still wild and hungry. The danger has not passed. It has merely been postponed. But in the quiet breathing of the child against her chest, in the slow, steady beat of the heart she has just calmed, there is a victory. The darkness did not win tonight. The predator went hungry. The lineage continues. The lullaby is not a soft thing. It is a shield of sound, forged in the fires of necessity, held up against the terrors of the night to say, "Not this one, not tonight. You are safe." And as the fire finally dies down to ash, and the mother's eyes close in the fitful sleep of the savage world, the memory of the song lingers in the air, a whisper of the first promise we ever made to each other, that in the face of the dark, we will not be silent, but we will be soft. Leave the wind behind. Leave the biting, scouring gale of the Pleistocene tundra, the white noise that has followed our ancestors across the steppes of Mammoth, across the frozen land bridges, and through the endless golden savannas. Leave the sun, that harsh and indifferent god that dictates the rhythm of the hunt. We are crossing a threshold now, stepping out of the world of the horizontal and into the world of the vertical. We are stepping out of the light and into the eternal heavy shadow of the earth itself. Imagine the moment of transition. It is the Upper Paleolithic, perhaps 30,000 years ago, in the limestone valleys of what we now call France or Spain. The air outside is thin and sharp, smelling of pine needles and snow. But as you stoop to enter the mouth of the cave, the atmosphere changes instantly. The temperature stabilizes, hovering at a constant cool 50 degrees, the breath of the planet. The smell changes. It is the scent of wet stone, of ancient dust, of water that has been filtering through the bedrock for 1,000,000 years, carrying the metallic tang of minerals. It is the smell of time itself, trapped in a bottle of rock. For the first time in the history of our species, we are entering a space that does not belong to the living. We are entering the limestone belly of the underworld. As our ancestors moved into the deep earth, exploring these twisting capillaries of stone, they carried with them the torches of juniper wood and animal fat, casting long, shivering shadows against the walls. They were looking for shelter, perhaps. They were looking for the hibernating cave bear, a god monster to be feared and revered. But in the silence of these chambers, they discovered something else. They discovered a phenomenon that would change their relationship with reality forever. They discovered that the stone could speak. This is the story of resonance. It is the story of how the cave became the first external hard drive for the human spirit, and more importantly, the first musical instrument. We often think of the cave paintings, the galloping horses of Lascaux, the silent bison of Altamira, as visual masterpieces. We visit them today, or their replicas, in hushed reverence, treating them like paintings in a modern gallery, static images to be looked at. But this is a misunderstanding of the ancient mind. We are looking at a silent movie and thinking we understand the plot, unaware that the soundtrack has been lost. Archaeologists, using the delicate tools of acoustic mapping, have made a startling discovery. The most heavily painted areas of these Paleolithic caves, the niches filled with the most vibrant red ochre and the deepest charcoal lines, are often the points with the most powerful acoustics. The placement of the art was not random. It was not dictated by where the wall was smoothest or where the light was best. It was dictated by where the echo was strongest. The cave was not a canvas, it was a cathedral. And the art was not meant to be seen, it was meant to be sung to. Let us walk in the footsteps of a Paleolithic explorer to understand the magnitude of this discovery. Imagine a lone hunter, separated from the group, pushing deep into a narrow fissure of the rock. The darkness here is absolute. It is a physical weight, pressing against the eyes, making the optic nerve fire in desperation, creating phantoms of light where there are none. The silence is equally heavy. It is not the quiet of the forest, which is full of hidden life. It is the dead silence of the geology. The hunter slips. He grunts in exertion. Or perhaps he calls out a name. Ah-ooh. And the wall answers. Ah-ooh. Ooh. Ooh. The sound does not die. It hangs in the air, suspended. It grows louder, richer, peeling apart into layers of harmonics that the human throat did not produce. The cave takes the thin, singular vibration of the voice and amplifies it, adding the resonance of the chamber, turning a simple cry into a chord. To the Stone Age mind, this was not physics. This was not the reflection of sound waves off a hard surface. This was magic. This was a spirit. The hunter had spoken to the rock, and the rock had answered with the voice of a giant. Consider the biography of the body in this moment. The ear, that sensitive instrument we tuned on the Savannah, is suddenly overwhelmed. For millions of years, our hearing evolved in the free field, the open air where sound travels away from the source and never returns. We were designed to pinpoint the snap of a twig or the roar of a lion in a landscape without walls. But here, the sound returns. It assaults the ear from all sides. The brain, struggling to map the source of the sound, becomes disoriented. The boundaries of the self begin to dissolve. When you speak in a highly resonant cave, you cannot tell where your voice ends and the room begins. You are vibrating. The air is vibrating. The stone is vibrating. You become part of the architecture. This discovery of external acoustics, of using the environment to manipulate the voice, was a technological leap as significant as the control of fire. Fire allowed us to manipulate light and heat. The cave allowed us to manipulate sound and consciousness. We began to map the underworld not with our eyes, but with our voices. We moved through the dark, humming, clicking, singing. We found the sweet spots, the nodes where the standing waves of sound were most intense. And at those spots, we stopped. We mixed our pigments, iron oxide for the blood of the earth, charcoal for the darkness of the night, and we painted. We painted what we heard. If the wall roared back like a bison, we painted a bison. If the wall whinnied with the high-frequency echo of a horse, we painted a horse. The image was a label for the sound. It was a visual anchor for an acoustic ceremony. Picture the shaman of the tribe, the keeper of the songs, preparing for a ritual. This is a scene of high drama played out in the bowels of the earth. The tribe has gathered at the cave mouth, but only the initiated, the chosen few, will descend. They strip off their heavy furs, perhaps, to feel the cool, damp air on their skin, to feel the vibration of the stone against their bare feet. They descend. The path is treacherous. They crawl through narrow wormholes of rock, squeezing their chests against the wet limestone, moving deeper into the sensory deprivation of the dark. They are leaving the profane world of the sun and entering the sacred world of the echo. They reach the great hall, a cavernous chamber where the ceiling soars into the shadows. They light the fat lamps. These are not bright, steady lights. They are flickering, sputtering flames fueled by rendered animal tallow. The light dances, and the shaman begins to hum. It starts as a low rumble, a sub-bass frequency that sits at the very bottom of the human vocal range. The shaman targets the resonant frequency of the cave. Every room has a note, a specific pitch at which it naturally vibrates. When the singer hits this note, the room wakes up. The sound swells effortlessly. The shaman is not just singing, he is playing the cave like a flute. He changes the shape of his mouth, the position of his tongue. That descended larynx we spoke of earlier now proving its spiritual worth. And he manipulates the overtones. He creates a sound that is larger than himself. He borrows the throat of the mountain. To the tribe members crouching in the dark, this is terrifying and beautiful. The voice is coming from everywhere. It is coming from the bison painted on the ceiling. In the flickering light of the lamps, the paintings seem to move. The bison heaves its chest. The horse tosses its mane. This is the first cinema. The multimedia experience mentioned in our title is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of the sensory bombardment. The visual motion of the flickering light combined with the enveloping, disorienting sound creates a shared hallucination. Scientific research into archaeoacoustics suggests that these specific resonant frequencies, often around 110 Hz, have a profound effect on the human brain. When exposed to this frequency for a sustained period, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, planning, and the self, begins to shut down. Activity shifts to the temporal lobes, the seat of emotion and mood. The sound literally alters the consciousness. It induces a trance state, the fear of the hunt, the grief of mortality, the anxiety of survival, all are washed away by the standing wave. The individual ego dissolves into the collective vibration of the group. This was the function of the cave. It was a machine for binding the tribe together. In the harsh light of the tundra, we were individuals struggling to eat. But in the dark resonance of the cave, we were one organism, sharing one breath, one voice, one spirit. Let us deepen the context of this day in the life. It is the night before a great hunt. The migration of the reindeer is approaching. The tribe is anxious. Starvation is a constant companion in the Pleistocene. If the hunt fails, the children die. The men and women need courage. They need to believe that they have power over the beasts. They need to believe that the spirit of the reindeer has already been caught. So they go to the acoustic trap. They go to the painted wall. The shaman stands before the image of the reindeer. He begins to mimic the sound of the herd, the clicking of tendons, the snort of breath, the thunder of hooves. The cave amplifies it. The others join in. They clap their hands. The acoustics of the cave turn the clapping into the sound of galloping. Soon the cave is filled with a phantom herd. The sound is so loud, so physical, that it rattles the teeth. The hunters believe, with every fiber of their being, that the reindeer are here. They have summoned them. They have captured their sonic souls. When they step out into the sunlight tomorrow, they will not be hunting strangers. They will be hunting animals they have already met in the spirit world. The spear has already been thrown in the mind. This is the evolutionary duality of the imagination. To survive, we had to become delusional. We had to believe in magic. We had to believe that singing to a rock could influence the movement of a herd 10 miles away. This belief did not change the behavior of the deer, but it changed the behavior of the humans. It gave them confidence. It coordinated their intent. It reduced their hesitation. And in the split-second violence of the hunt, hesitation is death. The cave was the incubator of the human belief system. It was the womb of religion. But it was also a place of individual confrontation. Picture an adolescent sent into the deep cave for a rite of passage. He is alone. The lamp has been extinguished. He is in the absolute dark. This is a sensory deprivation tank built by nature. Without visual input, the brain begins to hallucinate. It projects internal images onto the black canvas of the dark. And the ear? The ear becomes hyper-vigilant. He hears his own heart. Thud-thud. He hears the blood rushing in his veins. He hears the drip of water from a stalactite, sounding like a hammer striking an anvil in the silence. Plink. He hums to comfort himself. The wall answers. In that moment, the boy realizes he is not alone. The other is with him. He speaks to the echo. He confesses his fears. The echo listens. This is the birth of prayer. The realization that there is a listener in the dark, a presence that is invisible but audible. We carry this memory in our bones. It is why we build our holy places with stone and high ceilings. From the kivas of the American Southwest to the cathedrals of Gothic Europe, we have been trying to recreate the acoustics of the Paleolithic cave. We yearn for the long reverb. We yearn for the space where our small, fragile voices are transformed into something eternal. When you walk into a great cathedral and you hear a choir sing, and the sound seems to float in the air, detached from the singers, shimmering like light, you are feeling the ghost of the limestone. You are feeling the same awe that your ancestor felt when he groaned into a fissure in the Pyrenees and heard a god groan back. But there is a cost to this adaptation. The cave is a trap. To enter the earth is to risk death. The air can be bad. pockets of carbon dioxide that kill without warning. There are pits that drop into the abyss. There are cave bears, massive predators that hibernate in the dark. To use the cave as an instrument, we had to brave the monster's den. We found the skulls of cave bears arranged on rock slabs in these chambers, ancient altars. It suggests a complicated relationship. We feared the bear, we killed the bear, and we worshipped the bear. We took his home and turned it into our church. We took his roar and turned it into our song. The lost history mentioned in the prompt is the tragedy of silence. Today, the caves are quiet. The fires are out. The songs have been forgotten. We look at the red ochre handprints on the wall, the negative stencils where an ancestor placed their hand and blew paint over it, and we see a signature. I was here. But if we could listen to the rock, if we could replay the acoustic memory of the stone, we would hear the breath that blew that paint. We would hear the song that accompanied the hand. The handprint was not just a visual mark. It was the final note of a performance. It was the tactile culmination of a sonic ritual. The bison on the wall is a visual anchor, yes, but it is also a musical score. The curvature of the back line might suggest the rise in pitch. The heavy shading of the flank might suggest a louder volume. We are looking at sheet music written in blood and charcoal, and we have forgotten how to read it. As we moved out of the caves and into the Neolithic, we built our own caves. We arranged massive stones in circles, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe. Archaeologists have found that these stone circles also possess powerful resonant properties. They reflect sound. They create acoustic illusions. We were trying to bring the echo with us. We were trying to build a portable cave on the open plain. We are still doing it. You are wearing headphones right now or listening to speakers. You have built a tiny artificial cave around your ears. You have created a private acoustic space where the voice of the narrator resonates directly in your skull. You are shutting out the wind of the modern world to listen to the story by the fire. The technology has changed, from limestone walls to noise-canceling foam, but the desire is the same. We want to be held in sound. We want to be surrounded by the voice that pushes back the dark. So, let the image of the painted cave fade. Let the flickering lamp die down. But keep the sound. Listen to the room you are in right now. Is it silent? Or is there a hum? A vibration? Speak into the dark. Hello? Does the room answer? Even if it is just the soft absorption of a bedroom wall or the slight ring of a bathroom tile, the physics are the same. You are an acoustic creature in an acoustic world. You are a small vibration seeking resonance. And somewhere, deep in the genetic memory of your inner ear, the shaman is still singing. The bison is still breathing on the wall. And the great hollow belly of the earth is waiting to catch your voice and turn it into a ghost. The chapter of the cave is closed, but the echo never truly dies. It just travels further, waiting for a listener to catch it. The sun rises over the mammoth steppe, a pale, watery disk struggling to pierce the morning mist. It is 40,000 years ago. The world is vast, silent, and indifferent. The wind blows from the north, carrying the scent of glacial dust and the distant musk-heavy smell of the herds. In this landscape, the human being is a small, shivering verticality, a speck of flesh standing against the horizon of ice. For eons, we have moved through this world like ghosts, observing, reacting, and mimicking. We have been the listeners. We have been the watchers. We have communicated, yes, with the low hum of the lullaby, the sharp bark of the warning, the mimicked whistle of the bird. We have possessed the music of emotion. We could sing our grief. We could chant our rage, but we could not speak our thoughts. There was a ceiling to our mind. It was a glass ceiling made of sound. We could point to the river and say water with a grunt. We could point to the fire and say hot. But we could not say, if we cross the river tomorrow, the water might be too cold for the child. We could not construct the conditional. We could not build the cathedral of the hypothetical. The universe was locked in the eternal now. There was only the sensation of the present moment, visceral and immediate. The past was a fading echo, and the future was a mist that could not be grasped. Eventually, the pressure to break this glass ceiling became unbearable. As our social groups grew larger, as our tools became more complex, as the climate oscillated with violent unpredictability, the old way of singing the world was no longer enough. It was no longer enough to mimic nature or hum emotions. We needed to categorize the universe. We needed to cut the world into pieces so that we could rearrange it. We needed to become architects of the invisible. And so, in the deep silent workshops of the brain, a construction project began. It was not a project of stone or bone, but of neurons and axons. It was a subtle mutation, a silent error in the code of life that would rewrite the destiny of the planet. It was a rewiring of the neural pathways connecting the ear to the mouth, a thickening of the data cables that allowed the auditory cortex to speak directly to the motor cortex of the tongue. This was the birth of syntax. To understand the magnitude of this shift, we must look at the raw material we were working with, the breath. For millions of years, the breath was a stream. It was a river of air that flowed from the lungs, vibrated the vocal cords, and exited the mouth as a continuous wave. Ah, oh. These are the sounds of the animal. They are analog signals. They slide up and down the scale of pitch. They swell and fade in volume. They are beautiful, but they are imprecise. You cannot build a complex machine out of water. You need bricks. The great innovation of human language was the decision to freeze the river. We learned to break the continuous stream of sound into discrete frozen units. We invented the consonant. Consider the violence of a consonant, the letter P. To make this sound, you must stop the breath completely. You press your lips together, sealing the exit. The pressure builds in the mouth, and then you release it. Puh. It is a miniature explosion. It is a transient burst of noise that lasts only a few milliseconds. Consider the letter K. You raise the back of your tongue, slamming it against the soft palate. You block the airflow, you create a dam. And then you break the dam. Ku. These sounds, the stops, the fricatives, the plosives, are the bricks of language. They are the hard edges that allow us to chop the breath into segments. This was the digitization of sound. Before the computer, before the binary code of ones and zeros, there was the binary code of the mouth, sound and silence, flow and stop, vowel and consonant. By inserting these hard, percussive breaks into the river of our voice, we created a code. We created a system where a stream of noise could be broken down into individual packets of information. Cat is not a continuous sound. It is three sounds, ku-a-tu, welded together so tightly that the ear hears them as one. This required a staggering evolution of the hardware. The ear, which we have watched evolve from the jawbones of the reptile to the tuned receiver of the Savannah, now faced its greatest challenge. It had to become a high-speed processor. The click of a K or the hiss of an S are high-frequency transients. They happen so fast that they are barely a blip in the airwaves. If you slow down a recording of human speech, the consonants disappear into a smear of noise. The human brain had to evolve to decipher these rapid-fire acoustic signals instantly. It had to distinguish between pat and bat in less than the time it takes for a neuron to fire. This is a feat of computational speed that rivals any supercomputer. Deep within the temporal lobe, in a region known as Wernicke's area, the brain developed a library of these sounds. It learned to strip away the accent, the pitch, the volume, and extract the pure digital data of the phoneme. This was the moment we stopped just hearing the song and started decoding the message. Let us descend into a day in the life of this transition. It is the Upper Paleolithic. A small tribe is gathered in a shelter made of mammoth bones and reindeer hides. The wind is howling outside, a chaotic symphony of the mindless air. Inside, an elder is teaching a younger man how to make a complex tool. a harpoon point with a detachable head. In the old world, this lesson would have been purely visual. The elder would demonstrate, the youth would mimic. If the youth failed, the elder would grunt or push his hand. But this tool is too complex for mime. It requires a sequence of actions that are not obvious. It requires a concept. Weakness. The shaft must be weak enough to break away, but strong enough to penetrate. The elder holds the bone. He looks at the youth. He feels the frustration of the limited mind. And then, he engages the new circuitry. He uses the hard edges of his tongue. He makes a string of sounds. Cut, here, not, deep. The words hang in the air. They are not physical objects. You cannot touch not. You cannot hold deep. These are abstract concepts. They are invisible coordinates in the landscape of the mind. The youth hears the sounds. His brain, wired by the same mutation, catches these invisible bricks. He arranges them. He builds a model in his head. He understands. He cuts the bone shallowly. The tool works. This moment, the transmission of an instruction across the empty air, is the crossing of the Rubicon. We had gained the power to transfer a thought from one brain to another without touching. We had invented telepathy. We called it syntax. Syntax is the rulebook of the code. It is the architecture that allows us to arrange these sound bricks into infinite structures. With a finite number of sounds, perhaps 40 or 50 distinct phonemes, we can create an infinite number of sentences. This is the combinatorial infinity of language. We can say things that have never been said before in the history of the universe. The purple mammoth dances on the moon. This sentence describes a reality that does not exist. It describes a lie. It describes a dream. And yet, when you hear it, you see it. You see the purple fur. You see the lunar dust. This is the power of the gods. We built a library of sounds that represented things that were not present. We could talk about the concept of tomorrow. Think of the implications of tomorrow. An animal lives in the continuous present. A dog does not worry about next week. But with syntax, we could create a grammatical tense that pointed forward. We could displace ourselves in time. We could plan. We will meet at the big rock when the sun is high. This sentence is a time machine. It coordinates the future actions of the tribe. It allows for strategy. It allows for the ambush. It allows for the agriculture. It allows for the deferred gratification that builds civilization. But this power came with a terrible cost. This is the evolutionary duality that haunts us to this day. As we built this bubble of words, this overlay of linguistic noise, we began to separate ourselves from the physical world. Before language, we had a direct connection to the wind and the birds. When our ancestor heard a rustle in the grass, he heard the rustle. He experienced the pure sensory data. But once we had the word snake, the experience changed. Now, when we hear the rustle, the brain instantly labels it. Snake. The word flashes in the mind like a neon sign. We stop hearing the nuance of the sound. We hear the label. We stop seeing the specific, unique pattern of the scales. We see the generic concept of the category. We started to live inside a map, rather than the territory. This layer of linguistic noise began to overlay the natural world. We wrapped the earth in a web of definitions. The tree became timber. The animal became game. The water became resource. By naming things, we gained power over them, but we lost our intimacy with them. We objectified the universe, and the silence? The silence was lost forever. In the old mind, the mind of the animal, there were long periods of internal quiet. There was observation without judgment. There was being without thinking. But with the advent of syntax, the ceaseless internal monologue began. The brain, obsessed with its new toy, began to talk to itself. The machinery of language did not shut off when we stopped speaking to others. It turned inward. We began to narrate our own lives. We began to judge ourselves. We began to worry. Did I say the right thing? What will happen tomorrow? Why am I afraid? This is the chatter of the tribe moved inside the skull. We are never alone anymore. We are always accompanied by the narrator. This narrator is useful. It solves problems. It plans the future. But it is also a tyrant. It separates us from the peace of the present moment. It creates the anxiety of the abstract. We worry about things that are not here. We stress about scenarios that have not happened. We suffer from the syntax of the hypothetical. Let us return to the biography of the body. Look at the anatomy of your own throat and mouth, the descended larynx, the flexible tongue, the lips that can purse and snap. All of this evolved to serve the code. But look also at the brain. The arcuate fasciculus is a bundle of nerve fibers that connects Broca's area, where speech is produced, to Wernicke's area, where speech is understood. In humans, this cable is massive, a superhighway of information. In chimps, it is a thin dirt road. This biological cable is the physical manifestation of our separation from nature. It is the loop that keeps us trapped in the world of words. Imagine a night in the Neolithic, thousands of years later. The revolution is complete. We have farms. We have villages. We have priests. A man sits by the fire. He is looking at the stars. In the deep past, his ancestor would have looked at the stars and felt awe. He would have felt the cold light on his skin. He would have been a silent witness to the cosmos. But this Neolithic man does not just see stars. He sees the hunter. He sees the bear. He sees the constellations. He projects his stories onto the sky. He connects the dots with the lines of syntax. He reads the heavens like a book. He turns to his son. That is Orion, he says. He chases the bull. The son looks up. He no longer sees the chaotic beauty of the fusion reactors burning in the void. He sees a story. He sees a man and a bull. The syntax has colonized the sky. This is the tragedy and the glory of our species. We have paved over the wild world with a layer of meaning. We have turned the universe into a conversation. As the narrator of this documentary, I must speak to you now in the very code we are discussing. I am using syntax to describe the origin of syntax. I am using words to describe the time before words. It is a paradox. We cannot step outside the bubble to see it. We are made of the bubble. But sometimes, in the rare moments of your life, the code breaks down. Perhaps you are standing by the ocean in a storm. The roar of the waves is so loud, so chaotic, that it overwhelms the auditory processor. The brain cannot find a word for it. The internal monologue is drowned out by the sheer physical pressure of the sound. Or perhaps you are in deep pain or deep ecstasy. You make a sound that is not a word, a cry, a gasp. In those moments, the architecture of syntax collapses. The bricks crumble. The river flows again. You are briefly returned to the deep time. You are briefly an animal again, hearing the world with the naked ear, feeling the vibration without the label. You are hearing the truth before we chopped it up into nouns and verbs. But the moment passes. The brain reboots. The narrator clears its throat. Wow, you say. That was loud. And just like that, you are back in the cage. You are back in the library of the abstract. You are back in the human world. The architecture of syntax is the greatest monument we ever built. It is taller than the pyramids, more complex than the internet, more durable than stone. It is the cathedral of consciousness in which we all live. It allows us to know truth, to know justice, to know love. But as you fall asleep tonight, try a simple experiment. Try to stop the narrator. Try to listen to the room without naming the sounds. Try to feel the sheets without naming the fabric. Try to be, just for a moment, a creature of the silence before the song. It is harder than you think. The ghost of the grammar is haunting you. The click of the K and the hiss of the S are echoing in the corridors of your dreams. We are the species that talked itself into a new reality, and we have been talking ever since. And yet, deep within the marrow, beneath the noise of the words, the ancient ear is still listening. It is listening for the wind. It is listening for the heartbeat. It is listening for the sound that needs no translation. The story of sound is the story of how we moved from the vibration of the earth to the vibration of the mind. We traded the ground for the grammar. And in doing so, we gained the universe, but we lost the silence. To understand the violence of the modern world, we must first measure the silence of the ancient one. Let us retreat for a moment from the timeline we have so carefully walked. Let us step back from the edge of history and float above the long green river of the Holocene. For 10,000 years, a span that constitutes the entirety of human civilization before the smoke rose, the acoustic ceiling of the planet was set by the forces of nature. The loudest sound a human being could experience was the anger of the sky. A thunderclap, cracking the air directly overhead, could reach 120 decibels, a concussive blow that rattled the ribcage. A waterfall, thundering over a basalt cliff, could create a continuous roaring drone. The eruption of a volcano, the calving of a glacier, the crashing of a winter ocean against the shore. These were the titans of the soundscape. But they were rare. They were localized. They were temporary. For the vast majority of human existence, the world was a quiet place. The baseline volume of the planet was the rustle of wind in the grass, the murmur of flowing water, the chirping of insects. The noise floor, the background level of sound, was incredibly low. In the deep forests of the Neolithic or the open plains of the Bronze Age, silence was not empty. It was a canvas. It was a vast, transparent medium through which information traveled for miles. A shout could bridge a valley. The strike of an axe against a tree could be heard across a lake. The ear, that delicate instrument we have watched evolve from the jawbones of the reptile, was the master of this domain. It was the king of a quiet kingdom, tuned to the subtle, the distant, and the organic. And then, in the blink of a geological eye, the world ended. It did not end with an asteroid, nor with a plague, nor with a flood. It ended with a hiss. The transition began slowly, almost imperceptibly, with the rhythmic clanging of the blacksmith's hammer in the Iron Age. Clang, clang, clang. This was a new sound, the sound of metal striking metal. It was a hard, sharp transient that did not exist in nature. Rocks crumble, wood thuds, water splashes, but metal rings. It sustains, it cuts. Yet even this was a human sound, powered by the muscle of the arm, limited by the endurance of the body. It was rhythmic, like the persistence hunt. It was understandable. But the true rupture, the moment the acoustic history of the world broke in two, arrived in the damp, coal-stained valleys of northern England in the 18th century. It arrived with the harnessing of steam. We must pause here to appreciate the sheer, terrifying novelty of the machine. For millions of years, movement was biological. It was the contraction of a muscle, the beat of a wing, the flow of a river. But the steam engine was different. It was the conversion of heat into motion, and the byproduct of this conversion was noise. The burning of coal released the energy of ancient sunlight trapped in rock, and that energy was channeled into a piston. Chuff, hiss, clank. The machine did not get tired. It did not sleep. It did not breathe in the way a living thing breathes, with a soft organic rhythm. It breathed with a mechanical violence. It screamed. This is the beginning of the wall of iron and steam. Imagine walking into a textile mill in Manchester in 1850. You are a biological organism, evolved for the silence of the savannah, stepping into the belly of the beast. The air is thick with cotton dust, a white fog that coats the lungs. The smell is acrid, whale oil, hot metal, unwashed bodies, and the sulfurous stench of coal smoke. But it is the sound that assaults you. Hundreds of power looms are running simultaneously. The flying shuttles are snapping back and forth with the force of gunshots. The leather belts are slapping against the drive shafts. The gears are grinding, metal teeth chewing on metal teeth. The volume is constant, unrelenting, and deafening. It is a solid wall of noise, registering perhaps 100 decibels, sustained for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Your ear, the biographer of the body, is not prepared for this. It has no defense. Recall the anatomy we discussed in the earlier chapters. The middle ear has a reflex, the acoustic reflex, where tiny muscles tighten to dampen loud sounds. But this reflex was designed for short bursts, a clap of thunder, a lion's roar. It was not designed for the continuous grinding roar of the Industrial Revolution. The muscles tire, they slacken, and the full force of the energy wave crashes into the inner ear. Let us zoom in, with the lens of a microscope, to the scene of the crime. We enter the cochlea, that snail shell of bone deep inside the skull. We swim through the fluid of the perilymph until we reach the organ of Corti. Here, standing in neat military rows, are the hair cells. These stereocilia are the guardians of your consciousness. They are the transducers that turn the vibration of the air into the electricity of the mind. They are delicate, swaying like wheat in a gentle breeze. They are evolved to bend, to dance with the sound waves of a whisper or a bird call. But in the factory, they are not dancing. They are being battered. The sound pressure waves generated by the steam whistles and the power looms are like tsunamis crashing into a reed bed. The fluid in the cochlea becomes turbulent. The hair cells are whipped back and forth with violent force. Under this assault, the delicate structures begin to fail. The tiny filaments that connect the tips of the hairs, the tip links, snap. The metabolic machinery of the cell, exhausted by the constant demand to fire, begins to generate toxic byproducts. Oxidative stress builds up. The cell swells. And then, it dies. This is the tragedy of the mammalian ear. Unlike the birds or the reptiles who can regenerate these hair cells, mammals cannot. Once a hair cell in the human cochlea dies, it is gone forever. It leaves behind a scar, a gap in the field of wheat, a silence where there used to be a frequency. The specific frequency of the industrial roar, the clash of metal, the hiss of steam, often sits around 4,000 hertz. This is the boilermaker's notch. If you look at the audiogram of a 19th century factory worker, you see a deep V shape cut out of their hearing range. They have literally lost a piece of the world. They have lost the frequency of the consonant F, S, and teeth. They have lost the ability to hear the whisper of their own children. This was the first time in history that humans began to go deaf, not from age, not from disease, but from the environment they had built. We were carving the silence out of our own heads. But the wall of iron and steam was not just confined to the factory. It leaked out. It spread. It colonized the landscape. Consider the railway. Before the train, travel was silent. A horse's hooves on dirt, the creak of a wooden wheel. These were sounds that blended with the wind. But the steam locomotive was a dragon. It tore through the countryside, a line of fire and noise cutting through the pastoral silence. Stand in a field in Victorian England. The birds are singing. The sheep are bleating. And then, from miles away, comes the low rhythmic thrumming of the track. It builds. It grows. And then, the machine bursts into view. The whistle screams. A sound designed explicitly to be louder than anything else in nature, a warning that demands absolute acoustic submission. The ground shakes. The air is torn apart. For the animals in the field, this was an alien invasion. We know now that birds living near areas of high noise pollution have to change their songs. They sing louder, higher, more frantically, trying to be heard over the anthropogenic rumble. This is the Lombard effect. We forced nature to shout. We forced the birds to compete with the boiler. And what of the human mind? How did we cope with this new, loud world? We coped by shutting down. This is the psychological callus mentioned in our title. For millions of years, the human brain was wired to be an open system. We were hyper-vigilant listeners. Every sound was a piece of data. The snap of a twig meant something. The shift in the wind meant something. To ignore a sound was to miss a cue for survival. But in the city of the Industrial Revolution, in the streets of London, filled with the clatter of iron-shod hooves on cobblestones, the shouting of costermongers, the ringing of church bells, the roar of the factories, to listen to everything was to go mad. The brain could not process the sheer volume of data. It was sensory overload. So, we evolved a new software patch. We learned to ignore. We developed the ability to create a background. We pushed the roar of the city into the subconscious. We stopped hearing the traffic. We stopped hearing the hum. We built a mental wall to match the physical one. We learned to walk down a street surrounded by a cacophony that would have terrified a Paleolithic hunter. And we learned to think about our laundry, or our job, or our dinner, completely detaching ourselves from the acoustic reality. This was a survival strategy, yes. It preserved our sanity. But it came at a terrible cost. It severed the direct connection we spoke of in the chapter on syntax. We stopped inhabiting the world and started inhabiting our heads. The ancient technology of deep listening, of being tuned to the horizon, of hearing the silence between the sounds, became a vestige. It became a useless skill. Why listen to the horizon when you can't hear past the next block? Why listen for the subtle approach of winter when the radiator is hissing? The city became a place of acoustic assault, but also a place of acoustic isolation. We were surrounded by millions of people, yet we were trapped in our own private bubbles of noise cancellation. The social ear, tuned for the whisper of the hearth, was overwhelmed. We had to shout to be heard in the pub. We had to shout to be heard on the street. The nuance of prosody, the emotional musicality of the voice, was flattened by the need for volume. And as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the wall grew higher. The internal combustion engine replaced the steam engine. The explosion became the heartbeat of civilization. Every car is a series of controlled explosions, muffled by a muffler, but still vibrating the air. The airplane conquered the sky, dragging a carpet of noise across the clouds, erasing the one place that had remained silent. Electricity brought the hum, the 60-cycle hum of the grid, the whine of the refrigerator, the fan of the computer. We bathed the world in a constant low-frequency drone. We have forgotten what true silence sounds like. In the modern world, silence is defined as the absence of talking. But in the deep past, silence was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of the whole. It was the wind, the water, the bird, the breath. It was a textured, living silence. Today, if you are lucky enough to find a place without motors, an anechoic chamber or a deep cave or a remote desert, you might experience a strange phenomenon. You might hear a ringing in your ears, a high-pitched whine. This is tinnitus. It is the ghost of the machine. It is the sound of your own auditory system, damaged by years of exposure to the wall of noise, trying to find a signal that isn't there. It is the neurons firing in a feedback loop, searching for the lost frequencies. It is the scream of the hair cells that died long ago. It is a mournful reminder that we are not built for this. Let us construct a day in the life of this transition, to feel the weight of the change. Imagine a man named Thomas, born in a quiet farming village in 1780. His childhood soundscape is soft. He knows the sound of rain on thatch. He knows the sound of the scythe cutting wheat, a swish, swish rhythm that mimics the breath. He knows the church bell, which rings to mark the hours, a solemn, singular note that orders the day. But Thomas is driven off the land by the enclosures. He moves to Birmingham. He gets a job in a foundry. His first day is a trauma. The acoustic shock is physical. He feels the hammer blows in his teeth. He feels the roar of the furnace in his chest. He tries to speak to the man next to him, but his voice is swallowed. He learns to use hand signals. He learns to lip read. At night, he goes to a crowded tenement. The walls are thin. He hears the coughing of the neighbor. He hears the crying of a baby 3 rooms away. He hears the drunks in the alley. There is no circle of safety. There is no whisper of the hearth. The noise is invasive. It violates the sanctity of his rest. Thomas sleeps, but it is a shallow, defensive sleep. His cortisol levels remain high. His body is in a state of chronic low-level inflammation. He is aging faster than his father did. Years pass. Thomas adapts. He develops the callus. He stops noticing the hammer. He stops noticing the scream of the metal. He walks through the foundry with a blank face, a 1,000-yard stare of the ears. But he has lost something. When he returns to the country for a funeral, he finds the silence unnerving. The quiet of the fields feels heavy, oppressive. He misses the roar. He has become an addict of the noise. He has been colonized by the machine. This is the evolutionary duality of the industrial age. We adapted, yes, we survived. We built cities that house millions. We built technologies that can fly us across oceans. But we paid for it with our senses. We paid for it with the numbness of the ear. We built a world that is louder than our biology can handle, and so we had to dull our biology to fit the world. The wall of iron and steam is not just a metaphor for the factories of the past. It is the reality of the present. We are still living in the echo of that explosion. The siren that wakes you in the night, the leaf blower that ruins your Saturday morning, the roar of the subway. These are the aftershocks of the event that began 200 years ago. Scientific discovery tells us that noise pollution is not just an annoyance. It is a pathogen. It causes heart disease. It impairs learning in children. It drives mental illness. It is a toxin that we breathe in through our ears. And yet, there is a beauty in the resilience of the body. Even battered, even scarred, the ear continues to try. It continues to search for the signal in the noise. It continues to tune in to the voice of the friend, the melody of the song, the rhythm of the breath. But the history is clear. We are the species that broke the silence. We are the animals that decided that the sound of production was more important than the sound of existence. As we move toward the final chapter of our story, we must carry this weight. We must acknowledge that we have lost the acoustic horizon. We have traded the infinite listening of the Savannah for the closed loop of the city. But perhaps in acknowledging the loss, we can begin to find the value of the quiet again. Perhaps we can understand that silence is not empty, but full, and that the roar of the machine, for all its power, is just a temporary interruption in the long, deep song of the earth. The steam whistle screams, and the smoke rises, and the gears grind. But underneath it all, if you listen very closely, beneath the tinnitus and the traffic and the hum of the grid, the ancient ear is still waiting. It is waiting for the thunder. It is waiting for the wind. It is waiting for the silence to return. The hour is late. The blue light of the screens has finally dimmed, fading into the passive, blinking constellations of the modern bedroom. The traffic on the highway has thinned to a distant, rhythmic husking, like the breathing of a great metallic beast. You are lying in a box of drywall and glass, suspended in a climate-controlled microclimate, wrapped in synthetic fibers. By all accounts, you are the master of your environment. You are safe. You are fed. You are warm. And yet, there is a restlessness in the marrow. There is a twitch in the eyelid. There is a vigilance in the chest that refuses to uncoil. In the quiet moments of the modern night, when the distraction of the day dissolves, the ancient machinery still hums. We have spent the last 11 chapters traversing the deep time of the human story. We have walked on the bottom of the ocean where the Jawbones first began to migrate. We have run across the scorching anvils of the African savanna until our hearts beat in time with the earth. We have huddled in the limestone bellies of the Pyrenees, singing to the rock. We have built a biography of the ear, layer by layer, adaptation by adaptation. But this final chapter is not about the past as a foreign country. It is about the past as a living tenant in your present body. It is about the ghost that haunts the architecture of your sleep. Consider the phenomenon of the rain. Why, in an age of waterproof roofs and sealed windows, do we find the sound of rain so deeply, hypnotically soothing? Why does the drumming of water against the pane trigger an almost narcotic heaviness in the eyelids? Logically, rain should be a nuisance. To a primate without shelter, rain means cold. It means hypothermia. It means the misery of wet fur and shivering limbs. One might expect that the sound of a storm would trigger anxiety, a desire to move, to find cover. But the reaction is the opposite. The reaction is peace. To understand this, we must transport ourselves back to the Pleistocene, to a night perhaps 70,000 years ago. The setting is a rock shelter in the Ethiopian highlands. The tribe is gathered deep in the recess of the cliff, huddled together for warmth. Outside, the world has been erased by a deluge. The sky has opened up, and the rain is falling in sheets, a vertical ocean that drowns the landscape. For the predators that stalk the darkness, the leopards, the hyenas, the lions, this weather is a disaster. The rain washes away scent trails. It creates a chaotic acoustic environment where the snap of a twig or the rustle of a hoof is lost in the roar of the water. The rain blinds the eyes and numbs the nose. For the hunter, the storm is a time of sensory deprivation, and so the predators shelter. They retreat to their dens. They curl up and wait for the sky to clear. For our ancestors huddled in the cave, the sound of the rain was the sound of a ceasefire. It was a broadcast from the heavens that said, "The enemy is grounded. You are safe." The acoustic curtain of the rain created a wall of white noise that masked the sounds of the humans inside the cave, the crying baby, the snoring elder, the restless sleeper. It hid them from the world. When you lie in your bed tonight and listen to the rain, your conscious mind hears weather. But your amygdala, that ancient almond-shaped watchman in the brain, hears a security clearance. It recognizes the specific frequency spectrum of falling water, a chaotic but constant noise that occupies the mid to high range of hearing. It interprets this signal as a risk-free interval. It tells the adrenal glands to stand down. It tells the heart to slow. It permits the body to enter the deep, vulnerable paralysis of REM sleep, because the guardians of the wild have been neutralized by the storm. We are carrying a prehistoric desire for this specific acoustic environment. Our bodies are still waiting for the signals of the wild to tell us when it is safe to close our eyes. And what of the fire? We have spoken of the whisper of the hearth and the social revolution of the campfire. But consider the sound of the fire itself. The crackle, the pop, the low, rushing breath of the flames consuming the wood. Why is this sound so universally comforting? Why do we build artificial gas fireplaces in our high-rise apartments that emit no real heat, just for the visual and auditory ambiance? It is because the silence of the night was the time of greatest danger. Total silence in the wild is rarely a good sign. It often means that the insects and the frogs have stopped singing because a predator is moving through the grass. Silence is the sound of stalking. But the sound of the fire meant that the tribe was gathered. It meant that someone was awake, tending the flames. It meant that the circle of light, that fragile fortress against the dark, was intact. The pink noise of the fire, a frequency spectrum where the lower notes are louder than the higher notes, is a signal of human presence. It is the sound of us. When you fall asleep to the crackle of a fire, or even a recording of a fire, you are triggering a deep, vestigial memory of the communal sleep. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans did not sleep alone in private rooms. We slept in piles. We slept in a tangle of limbs and furs, a puppy pile of humanity. The sound of the fire was the rhythmic accompaniment to the sound of our kin breathing. It was the soundtrack of continuity. To hear the fire was to know that you had not been abandoned in the dark. And then, there is the fan, the hum of the air conditioner, the drone of the white noise machine, the static of the radio between stations. We treat these as modern conveniences, or perhaps as masking agents to block out the noise of the garbage truck or the neighbor's television. But the biology of the obsession goes deeper. White noise mimics the broadband sounds of nature. It mimics the wind moving through the millions of leaves in the acacia canopy. It mimics the rushing of a distant river. It mimics the ocean crashing on the shore. These sounds act as an acoustic blanket. In a dead silent room, a sudden noise, a car door slamming, a floorboard creaking, creates a sharp spike in the auditory signal. This spike triggers the startle reflex, a brainstem response that jerks you awake before you are even conscious of the sound. This is the legacy of the prey animal. The sudden snap is the leopard. But when there is a background hum, the wind, the river, the fan, the sharp spike is smoothed out. The dynamic range of the environment is compressed. The predator's footfall is buried in the rush of the water. The brain feels the blanket of sound and relaxes its vigilance. It is a profound irony that we have built a civilization of concrete and glass, creating the most acoustically artificial environment in the history of the earth, only to find that we cannot sleep in it. We have sealed out the wind, we have diverted the rivers, we have banished the crickets, we have created the quiet room, and we found it terrifying. So what do? We become technological shamans. We use our silicon chips and our lithium batteries to summon the ghosts. We put on headphones. We open an app. We scroll through a menu of rain on a tin roof, forest stream, cracking campfire, thunderstorm in the distance. We select the soundscape of the Pleistocene. We press play, and in that moment, a strange and beautiful deception occurs. The sound waves travel through the wires, vibrate the tiny magnets in the drivers, and push the air into your ear canal. The eardrum, that stretched skin of the ancient jaw, vibrates. The ossicles, the hammer, anvil, and stirrup that migrated from the reptile mouth, dance their microscopic jig. The cochlea, the snail shell of the ocean, ripples, and the brain, sitting in its dark cavern of bone, is tricked. It does not know that you are in a high-rise in Tokyo or a suburb in Ohio. It does not know that the year is 2024. It analyzes the frequency, the timbre, the rhythm. It matches the data against the genetic library stored in the deep limbic system. Data match, moving water. Interpretation, fresh water source nearby. Thirst is quenchable. Safety is high. Data match, rushing wind. Interpretation, scent dispersion. Predators cannot smell us. Data match, low rumble of thunder. Interpretation, the sky gods are active, but distant. The body responds, the shoulders drop, the jaw unclenches. The breath deepens. You are using modern technology to reclaim the ancient acoustic comfort you lost. You are building a digital cave. This is the ghost frequency. It is the echo of a world that no longer exists, humming in the machinery of the present. We are creatures of the open air, trapped in boxes, using recordings of the wind to remember who we are. But this is not a tragedy. It is a testament to the durability of the body. It is proof that despite the wall of iron and steam, despite the architecture of syntax, despite the asphalt and the neon, the animal is still alive. The listener is still listening. As you lie there now, feeling the weight of the day slip away, consider the journey your ears have taken to get to this pillow. Think of the silence of the stone, the long, mute wait in the pre-mammalian earth, where the only sound was the thud of the ground. That silence is in you still. It is the silence of your bones. Think of the migration of the jawbones, the agony of the detachment, the sacrifice of the bite for the song. That sacrifice is in you still. It is the fragility of your hearing, the preciousness of the mechanism. Think of the vigil of the nocturnal forest, the twitching ears of the shrew in the dinosaur dark. That vigilance is in you still. It is the reason you wake when the floorboards creak. Think of the tuning of the Savannah, the calibration of your hearing to the human voice. That tuning is in you still. It is the reason you crave the sound of a story before you sleep. Think of the lullaby as survival, the mother humming into the soft skull of the child to hide them from the wolves. That lullaby is in you still. It is the reason you want to be soothed. All of these moments are not dead history. They are layers of your own being. They are the strata of your sensation. The history of sound is not gone. It is written in the architecture of your sleep. So now, let the silence return. But not the empty silence of the void. Let it be the textured silence of the memory. Imagine the walls of your room dissolving. The ceiling opens up to reveal the vast, star-dusted arm of the Milky Way, undimmed by city lights. The floor turns to soft, dry grass. The air grows cool and smells of wood smoke and damp earth. You are back in the Rift Valley. The fire is dying down, casting a warm red glow on the faces of your kin sleeping around you. You can hear their breathing, a rhythmic, oceanic tide of life. You can hear the distant, lowing call of the wildebeest. You can hear the wind moving through the acacia thorns, a soft, sibilant hush. Shh. The watchman in your brain nods. The perimeter is secure. The frequency is correct. Drift down now. Drift down through the layers of the cortex, past the words, past the worries, past the names of things. Drift down into the brainstem. Listen to the rhythm of your own heart. Lub-dub. Lub-dub. It is the drum of the persistence hunt, slowed now to the tempo of rest. It is the oldest sound in your world, the sound you heard before you had a name, floating in the water of the womb. Listen to your breath, in and out. It is the wind in the cave. It is the spirit moving over the waters. The modern world is fading. The emails, the deadlines, the traffic, the noise, they are just a temporary storm. They are blowing over. Beneath them, the solid earth remains. Beneath them, the ancient listener is safe. You are part of a lineage that survived the dark. You are the child of the ones who heard the warning. You are the descendant of the ones who sang to the rock. You have listened well. You have carried the story. Now you may rest. The machinery hums. The ghost sings. The rain falls. Good night.